What's happening? EJ Stewart, Kendall Stewart, here live on YouTube, live on X, and soon to be, once I click the button, live on Instagram. This is a special presentation you're seeing from New Generation Media where me, Kendall, we're going to be doing our March Madness breakdown. We're calling that our kind of bracket blitz, as we like to say. Kendall, the men's tournament bracket just came out. So we now know all the matchups. We know who the teams are in the tournament. We know who they'll be playing. So obviously I am big time excited about this. How are you feeling after now the brackets have finally been revealed?
Yes, this is certainly a holiday for all who celebrate Selection Sunday. It is particularly if you're one of the 68 teams, you're a fan of one of the 68 teams that make it to the NCAA tournament. Yeah, it's a huge day. In this, we've talked about it. We talked about it on your 40 Days or 40 Nights show that you were doing. That this is going to be a very exciting NCAA tournament. There's a lot of teams that can go really far. There's a lot of great players that are going to be playing. If you're maybe a casual basketball fan, maybe you're more of an NBA fan, there's a lot of big-time NBA prospects that will also be playing in this NCAA tournament as well. So we'll cover all the bases, teams to watch, Cinderellas to watch, prospects to watch, and, of course, teams that we think could be cutting down the nets come April.
And that's really what this is about. And, in this show, we'll have to talk a little bit at the top as well about the teams that did not get in and have that conversation as well. This felt like a weird bubble where I didn't feel like, and this is what's going to happen when you have a field of 68 as opposed to what it was back in the day with a field of 64. I felt like those teams that were 65 and 66, it felt like, man, those are some good teams maybe that missed out. When you're at 68, and we're arguing about a team that's essentially a 500 team make the tournament, I'm not going to go crazy over that, but I think there is a little bit of an interesting conversation because of Miami of Ohio. And let's maybe begin there real quick so we can get that out of the way and then we can get to these teams. Were you surprised about how the bubble ended up landing, where you have Miami of Ohio now I hate committees. Like, this reminded me again how much I hate committees. So, and to be clear, I think this committee for the most part did a pretty good job. But yeah, the guy on there, I don't remember the guy who was doing it this year, but he's asking the question, and Seth Davis says, "Hey, Miami of Ohio, they're the lowest ranked team. That's an at-large team, so therefore that means they're the last team in, right?" He's like, "No, they actually were ahead of all the other four teams that were in the first four matchups, but like they did something called scrubbing, and based on the scrubbing, somehow they got dipped down. I guess it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day they were going to be in the bottom four anyway. But Miami of Ohio is the lowest ranked at-large team to get in." Not the last team to get in, he wanted to clarify, which, I don't know what that means. But did you have a problem with Miami, Ohio being that team that got in, along with some of those other teams, SMU, NC State, Texas? Those are the first four teams. And you had your Oklahoma, who just missed out, Auburn, who just missed out, Indiana. Did you have any problem with how the bubble shook out?
No, yeah. I mean, it's like you said, this is I don't know what it's a microcosm of. Like you said, it's definitely a microcosm of, obviously, the expansion that we had. But, we've had an expanded field for a while now, and it feels like we've had stronger bubbles in the past. And this is just a year where I just don't feel bad for anybody that didn't make it. If any of those four teams, besides maybe Miami of Ohio, because they went 30-1 or, 28-1, whatever they were, I feel a little worse, if they didn't make it despite their circumstances, and despite them being the last team in, seemingly. But ultimately, I wouldn't have felt bad for any of the teams. So again, Auburn, 17-16. I don't know what to say. I mean, yes, they played a very tough schedule, but they didn't win a lot of those games. And so At the end of the day, they had a really close game against Houston. If they win that game, they're probably in. They played Tennessee well in the SEC tournament. They win that game, they're almost certainly in at this point. Same with Oklahoma, lost to Arkansas. If they beat Arkansas, Acuff had to score 37 points to win that game. If they win that game, OU, they're probably in. So it's tough, but at the same time, those are essentially playing games at that point. And, they didn't win them. So I don't feel that bad. Like Miami of Ohio, you could argue their playing game was against UMass and they didn't win it, but they went. That was the only game they lost all year. Like
they won every other game.
Is every game a playing game at that point?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, we have this conversation. Uh, First of all, I have this conversation. I think me and you kind of, listen, you're a Memphis fan. I'm a Gonzaga fan. We both have lived in this, shell of being in a mid-major conference with teams that operate like power schools. So there's a lot of, misinformation, I think, that comes with what it means to play in a mid-major conference. And the gripe that you and I both always have, and I think this is where the committee stood, and I agree, is when you play in a conference like the SEC or the Big 12 or the Big 10, your season is essentially the tournament. Like you're playing tournament games. You're playing against
Yes.
top-notch teams, which means yes, you may have a few good wins. Auburn certainly has some very good wins. Oklahoma has some good wins, but at the end of the day, we're getting a full body of work of who you are as a basketball team against tournament level competition. All those teams have bad records when it comes to quad one records. Like the reason why they amassed all those losses was because they couldn't beat those teams more often than they did more often than they lost to them. That was the reality. So to me, we've seen those teams play top-notch competition. We could say it's their fault. You could say they're shook. I don't know what the deal is. I haven't seen Miami of Ohio get those opportunities, but I did see them face the competition that they had, and they won every game except for one. I just think it would have been ridiculous to say, okay, these teams, they got opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. At some point, you could have went on a little run to show, hey, we're pretty good. Like there are some teams that had ups and downs, peaks and valleys. TCU had peaks and valleys in the season. Other teams that were 8 or 9, 10 seeds. I mean, NC State got in fairly comfortably, but like they lost 7 out of the last 9 games. Like but they've shown us though that they can beat some of these teams. Like they've had enough time to put together a record. Say, okay, you can be up and down and still make it. These teams were just mid the whole way. Indiana, mid the whole way. Not too many top-notch wins to show for it. So I'm always going to lean towards the lower teams, the mid-major teams, or the teams with the high records. Because like my thing is like you have a zillion opportunities against good teams, and the best you do is 500. 500 doesn't tell me you're excellent. 500 doesn't tell me that you're an ability to maybe go deep into the tournament. So I can't really cry over spilled milk for teams like Oklahoma and Auburn today.
These metrics, like the net ranking that the NCAA has devised, and many conspiracy theorists will say they devised it so that they can justify putting as many power conference teams as possible. Like it doesn't take into account. And I don't want to be the guy that's the analytics, they don't watch the games and whatever, right. But it doesn't take into account the stress, like you mentioned, of being in that small conference where literally, according to their quad 1, quad 2 system, every game is every game is an opportunity. There's no opportunity if you're in a small conference to ever change.
Right.
Yes, every game is a chance to lose. If you lose, you have a devastating loss, and if you win, you get no credit for it. And on the flip side, if you're a team like Auburn and you're in the SEC, every single game is an opportunity to put a good win on your resume, and it's also an opportunity to, it's a loss that doesn't really matter. So when those losses accumulate to a ridiculous number, like 16 losses for the season, at a certain point we have to say, sure, you have 4 or 5 or 6 even good wins, but every game you play is an opportunity for a good win. So again, if you go 6-15 or 7-11 in the SEC, which is what they did, and again, how many of those wins were against South Carolina and LSU? You ultimately end up not really putting together that much of a strong resume, and it's just it's an unfortunate system. But at the end of the day, those teams, we don't know how good Miami of Ohio really is because again, we haven't seen them play against the top competition really at all this season. But we kind of know what Auburn is. And it's like, do we really want to put the teams that we kind of know aren't that good, or the teams that maybe are, maybe they're not? We don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're special. Yeah, and at the end of the day, like I always say, like it's also an entertainment product. And the Auburn and Oklahomas of the world don't make this thing special. Like the team that is a mid-major conference team that usually will get bounced out in the first round, and then that's the end of their story. That's not the stories we care about. We care about the smaller conference teams getting those opportunities. So I get it. Like, with the case in Miami, Ohio, I thought that was a no-brainer. They get in. They're not playing in that first 4, and we'll talk about the first 4 as well. But let's break down the rest of these brackets. Let's get to what you guys want to hear about, which is how are these games going to shake out. Now that the old news is done about who didn't get in, who got in, I had no problem with the picks that they made. There wasn't a bubble team that I thought that was out that I thought should have got in. I think they got all the teams right. So now it's about, all right, who do we have playing? So let's get to that, man. And I want to talk. Let's start with the East region here. So the East region, Duke ended up landing the #1 overall seed in this region. How did you feel about that decision in terms of how that shook out, and whether or not you thought that that was the right move to make them the #1 overall seed?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that was it was an easy. I wouldn't say it was an easy decision, but the decision got a lot easier when Duke and Michigan played each other in Washington D.C. last month, and Duke beat them. Head to head, not neutral site. And obviously Duke's gone on to win their conference tournament, win the ACC, and Michigan went on to not win their conference tournament. And so it became a fairly easy decision at that point. I think Duke's a worthy #1 overall seed. The biggest question for them is just going to be, what's the health of Caleb Foster? What's the health of Patrick Gumba? Are those guys going to be back? Because they beat Michigan with those guys playing. And since those guys have been out, they've looked a lot more ordinary. The ACC is better than it was last year, but it's still not great. Yeah. And, they had to kind of nip and tuck their way through the rest of the season without those guys. So, in the ACC tournament. So,
yeah, the Virginia game could have went either way, I thought. And I just thought they were going to maybe lose that game the way it was shaking out.
Florida State had them.
Florida State had them
on a shot.
Yeah.
To the wire. So, if Florida State's a team that didn't make it, right? If they win that game, maybe they start to get into the conversation, depending on how far they go in the ACC tournament. But they're a team that didn't make it, so the 8-9 game obviously is Ohio State TCU. One of those teams, in theory, could present a challenge to Duke if they can't get healthy.
Yeah, let's show the bracket to the folks so people can get a good sense of what we're looking at here. So I'm gonna show you guys each region here. So this is the top of the region, and we'll scroll down and get to the bottom. So you got Duke, Siena. Then you have Ohio State, TCU. These games were played in Greensville, South Carolina. Then the other half of this bracket, I think the second half of this bracket is pretty gnarly potentially. So you got St. John's as a 5 seed. Northern Iowa from the Missouri Valley gets your 12. And you have Kansas, Cal Baptist in your 4-13 matchup. I'll be honest, as a #1 overall seed, I think the bottom half of the bracket is not that crazy, but I thought the first half, I didn't think Duke got favors for who they saw in the 4 and 5. Kansas has shown that it seems like they play up to better competition. Now, albeit they're a entirely different team away from Fog Allen than they are when they're there. So maybe they're a little fool's gold because they've had amazing wings in Fog Allen and some really great performances there. And then they've gone on the road against some of these other teams and then just they gotten their doors blown off. But you still have high-end talent with Aaron Peterson. I think you have good guard play with Council, a coach with
a big man, Badunga, who's tough.
Yeah, Badunga, who's been awesome this year. And then on the flip side, you got a St. John's team who I think has a lot to prove. This is a team that they did not do what they wanted to do last year when it came to this tournament. They kind of, flopped. Is the best way to describe it. They were a 2 seed that I think people thought maybe get to the Final Four, and they had that miserable performance against Arkansas. And I'll ask you about St. John's seeding in a second. And we did have a comment from Jay Willie 1223, who made the case that he feels that St. John's got a raw deal, and a lot of people have been talking about that. How do you feel about the top half of this bracket in terms of just kind of how it shook out before we get to maybe some sleepers and some things here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they got first of all, I think Duke got the weakest 8-9 matchup.
I agree with that. I agree with that too. Yeah.
So if you're just, if you're going off that, you'll take that just to try and see if we can get to the second weekend. But the 4 or 5, I think you could argue is the most dangerous 4 or 5 combination.
The toughest, yeah.
And the scariest 4 or 5 if you're a team like Duke. You would have much rather seen again a Texas Tech without JT Toppin. The Texas Tech already beat Duke, but
right, yeah.
that was with JT Toppin.
Yeah,
so it was a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Did Duke play Kansas earlier in the year? Was that Champions Classic? I'm forgetting. But I think Kansas. I think Duke beat Kansas.
Yeah. I don't remember off the top of my head.
But no, I mean, look, the Kansas and St. John's that was a matchup that we thought we were going to get last year, but then John Calipari had other ideas.
Yeah, sure.
That is, again, a tough draw for St. John's as a 5 seed. The obvious comparison, St. John's was one of the tougher teams to seed, I think, in this whole entire bracket, because the obvious comparison to UConn is going to be made. I mean, this team, they beat them 2 out of 3 times, won the regular season conference championship, won the conference tournament championship, and UConn gets a 2 and they get a 5. That's hard to swallow if you're St. John's. St. John's not arguing for a 1 seed or a 2 seed, but to not get closer to that 2 line is tough. But again, the Big East was not good this year, and I think that's the reflection on it. But again, UConn was able to get a 2, so I think that's gonna be the challenge that they probably want to make.
And another thing about St. John's too, and it's a challenge for them as well in having this conversation, is like, what do you do with teams who improve? Because St. John's, I think they got dinged twice. One, I think they got dinged for a non-conference that was very uninspiring, as someone who watched them very closely and was rooting for them. They looked like they were one of the worst defensive teams, I thought, in the country, in terms of the better teams in the country at that time. And they looked like they didn't really have the whole point guard thing figured out. That seems to have been straightened out. Both of those things, their defense has gotten much better, and they've gotten much better guard play since. But they've also done that against what we think is weaker competition in the Big East. So how do you justify that? How do you rectify that? Yeah. I was at the Big East tournament, so I watched St. John's up close and personal. I will say, I think their defense has improved a ton. They are extremely fast and extremely athletic with their wings. Rick Pitino said it after the game. I was at the press conference, and he mentioned how Mitchell and Hopkins really don't get enough credit. I think those guys have also played better. I don't think it's necessarily those guys don't get enough credit. I think that those guys have stepped up their games. And they both just took over the Big East tournament final with their energy. And
they've got one of the best front courts. They have a front court that can match up with any team in college basketball.
Yeah.
Besides,
so what do you do? Yeah. So what do you do with a team that got better? Like, okay, yes, they lost to those very good teams in non-conference, but they may be a better team than they are now, and they showed it during a conference play, albeit against not maybe the greatest competition, but against UConn, who you confirmed is great competition because you made them a 2 seed. They won 2 out of 3. So that's a tough thing, but they got dinged, I think, for non-conference, and I think they also got dinged, and I put this on social media, I think they got a fraud tax. I think that what happened last year is in the back of the mind of the committee. And I think that they said we gave St. John's the benefit of the doubt in what was also a weak Big East last year. The Big East wasn't good last year either.
Yeah,
a weak Big East last year. We gave them the benefit of the doubt because it was St. John's and it was Rick Pitino, and they were proved to be one of the best teams. They were dominant in the conference, and they went up against a mid SEC team, and they did not look like they didn't look like the more talented team. They didn't look like the better team. They didn't look like the better coach team. So I think that stuck in the committee's minds. Now, I'm not as offended by the 5 seed for St. John's. I think that when you look at some of those other teams that hurt them, I think maybe you would argue should Nebraska have gotten a 4 instead of a 5. St. John, Nebraska are 20-0. I don't know. Like, you'd have to tell me who's the team that's on the 4 line that you're saying does not deserve to be there before I jump to say, yeah, you know what, St. John's got hosed. I wasn't that surprised by this. I was ready for it. I was ready for it, Kendall.
Yeah, I also Duke did beat Kansas early in the year, but Peterson didn't.
Yes, he did.
Play.
By the way, I did look that up.
It was kind of an irrelevant. Yeah, Peterson didn't play. It was kind of an irrelevant outcome, but they did play him pretty close. But this would be a rematch. But St. John's, you hit the nail on the head on. It's tough. Like, every game is supposed to matter, but at the same time, they're playing so much better now than they were earlier in the year. But like you said, it's against a weaker Big East. So what does that mean? It's again, UConn's not playing as good as they were early in the year. Against against a weaker Big East, they've had some weird results. They barely beat Seton Hall. They lose to Marquette. They kind of limped through the Big East by the end of it. But I think the St. John's loss to UConn in Stores also didn't help them.
Yeah, it was particularly an ugly loss. Yeah.
Yeah, such an ugly loss. I would have watched it away after they beat them in the Big East Championship, but maybe they didn't. Um, I don't know if you want to get to the second half of the bracket. I
Yeah,
know
let's go
in
to the
terms
second
of
half here.
I was just going to say real quick that I think that Cal Baptist is an interesting 13 seed against Kansas. Um, Kansas is a weird team. We'll see what Darren Peterson shows up.
Yeah.
But they do have a point guard, Dominic Daniels, who's super electric. And if you're looking for a guy who could take over on one of these double-digit seeds, he's a guy that could do that. But yeah, let's get to the second half.
Yeah, man. Second half of this bracket, so you got Louisville, South Florida, Michigan State versus North Dakota State. That's gonna be in Buffalo. You got UCLA, UCF in Philly, and you got UConn is the 2 seed in this bracket, and they get Furman. So I think me and you both. You texted to me right as I was tweeting this. I think Louisville, South Florida looks like an absolute barn burner on paper. These are 2 teams that get up and down, that take a lot of threes. I expect that to be a high-scoring game. I think that's almost like a kind of a push kind of game. So I'm very high on Louisville. I know Kenny just dropped out. I'll just say real quickly. No, I was saying that you texted it to me, and I was about to tweet it. Louisville, South Florida, track meet impending in terms of that matchup. That's going to be, I think, a lot of fun. Michigan State ended up falling, it seems like, to a 3. I'm not as high on them, so I actually feel like this is probably where they belong, to be honest. UCLA, they have the injury to Dent, so they're going to be interesting having to fly across country. And then you got UConn here at 2 playing in Philadelphia, which I'm sure will be a great crowd for UConn. So, again, I thought this is the part where it looks like to me Duke is a number 1 seed. Because I see the bottom half of this bracket, and I'm not as afraid for them. I see that Sweet 16 game, and I say, ooh, that scares me a little bit. But the rest of this bracket looks a little more solid. They handled Louisville during the season. Again, Michigan State, I have questions marks about would they be able to score against Duke's in just ridiculous defense. And then, UConn is a team that, again, we did see the Big East tournament. And my problem with UConn, we talked about them a ton prior to the show, is when the system doesn't work, where do they consistently get offense from? Can you do this just with Tyrus Reed underneath the basket?
Yeah, it's got to be Tyrus Reed, but against a team like St. John's, it's massive. It's hard.
Yeah, St. John, and then look, they play against Duke, and Gabunga's back, and you got Boozer. That's not gonna be easy either. Michigan State has size in the paint, so this side might get wacky. I don't know if this is gonna be a chalk here. I think that you could have a 6-11 upset. I think UCLA could be vulnerable flying cross country potentially without their starting point guard healthy, and Donovan Dent, who's a star, and UConn. It's not like they have the toughest competition in this region, but I think they look like paper tigers to me. I'm being honest. I think the record looks gaudy and the seeding looks gaudy, but this doesn't feel like the UConn team I saw a couple of years ago that dominated college basketball. That was deserving of this kind of seeding. So that's kind of how I saw it. I don't know how you saw it, Kendall.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like UConn. I love Dan Hurley. I love their offensive system. I love their program, but the teams that have gone far have been teams that they're UConn teams that have won national titles the last few years. Have been teams that have they have peaked at the right time. And this doesn't feel like they feel like they're kind of doing what they were doing last year, which is kind of sputtering into the NCAA tournament. I'll be honest, Furman is a dangerous 15 seed.
I agree.
I watched Furman in the SoCon title game. This is a program that's been to the NCAA tournament a few times now in the last 5, 6, 7 years under Bob Ritchie. That is not they're a younger team normally than than you get from a team that won 20-something games and won their conference tournament. But they've got some young talent and size. It's gonna be tough playing UConn and Philly for either them or UCLA or UCF.
It's gonna be tough for all those teams.
I mean, we've seen that. You just saw that UConn fan base in New York. They travel. They will be in Philly in droves. They will be, if they get to the second weekend, they will be in DC in droves. Um, I actually think UConn is a dangerous team against a Duke if it got there. Of course, that again,
Interesting.
it's going to take a lot for them to get there. But I think that Duke is honestly the team that UConn want to face the most of these one seeds.
Why is that?
Because I think Duke is not that deep. They don't. They're not. They're not that deep in terms of guys that scare you. Um, they obviously have Cameron Boozer is arguably the best player in college
Yeah,
basketball.
very scary that guy.
They've got yes, he is very scary.
Yeah.
They have NBA type front line. They've got Isaiah Evans is one of the best shooters in college basketball. But if your team and John Shire doesn't get enough credit as an elite X's and O's
Yeah,
basketball.
he's one of the best. He's one of the best coaches
right?
in the country, easily.
Yeah, I mean this is not the Coach K the latter years of Coach K Duke teams where it kind of felt like they were rolling the ball out a little bit.
Yeah.
They run some really strong stuff, but I feel like he gets the most out of that team, if that makes sense. Like I don't think they're maybe as talented as you would imagine a Duke team that's the number one overall seed. They're very top heavy in terms of having a superstar. Like they're not even last year's team. Like last year's team had Flag, but then you had Knipple, you had Proctor, you had Malawash. They had a bunch of NBA guys. Sion James was an NBA guy. This team is again, they're talented, they're deep. Like they're not they're more talented than the average team. But if you're UConn, you can say to yourself, this is more of a chess match. We've got pieces that can go up against their pieces. It's just, do they have a guy that can score with Cameron Boozer? But Boozer is liable to have off nights, right? Maybe not off nights in the sense of, he'll still get his numbers, but we saw it even in the ACC championship game against Virginia. Only had 13 points. I think he shot like 3 for 14. Like he did, he had a tough game for his standard. He can't have that against a team like UConn. So I think that from UConn's perspective, I think they actually got a pretty decent draw. I don't think they could have competed with Arizona. I'm not sure they could have competed with Michigan or even Florida. We saw them play Florida, different Florida team. We saw them play Florida last year. They played them tough, but I think those would be tough matchups.
So when you look at this bracket as a whole, so let's pull it out here. When you look at, let's go with a favorite first round matchup. What do you have here of any of these matchups?
I mean, you mentioned it. I'm gonna go back down to that 6-11 matchup, Louisville and South Florida. I mean, I think those two very good coaches. I mean, Pat Kelsey's obviously done a great job at Louisville, and Brian Hodgson's only in his first year at South Florida. But he came over from Arkansas State. They were really good last year. They didn't win their conference tournament, so he didn't put himself on the map and put the program on the map the way that they probably could have. But South Florida still identified them. They identified him as an up and coming coach. Comes to South Florida, brings the Nate Oates Alabama system over to Tampa, and they didn't miss a beat. This is a program again and a team that dominated the American Conference all year. They shoot the ball a ton. They shoot the ball really well. They've got really good guard play, and they play at an extremely fast pace. This is going to be a very exciting game one way or the other. Louisville, but they're also very Jekyll and Hyde. If they have an off night, they could lose to South Florida. This is a tough draw if you are Louisville. This is not a team that you wanted to have to face. Because there are teams that you could say to yourself, oh, we could play our C game and still win. I'm not sure Louisville could play their C plus game and win this game. Because South Florida, it goes back to that conversation we were having about those smaller conference teams. They're so used to having to play an A game because the other team's gonna the other team they're playing is gonna play an A game. They're so well coached, so well prepared. They're probably not gonna play an off night, and so you got to bring your A game if you're Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could fake the funk and say, oh, there's another game. I think Louisville, South Florida, I'm sorry, is the game to watch. This could be the most exciting game of the first round. There are a couple of games like that. We'll get to more of them. This could be one of the most exciting games in the first round because of the style of play. These are two teams that take a ton of threes and are also very streaky. So I'm very fascinated like how they're going to play in this kind of big environment, big atmosphere. But I think also you mentioned the Kansas Cal Baptist matchup too. I think that Cal Baptist, again, you got great guard play and a Kansas team that has just been very weird. They don't know when Darren Peterson is going to play, when he's not going to play. Their ceiling has been super high, but they've also had some really disappointing losses this year. On paper, there's no reason I think that they should have a problem with a team like Cal Baptist, but I've watched a lot of Kansas because of the NBA draft stuff, and we'll get to draft stuff in a second before we move on from this region. That I know that Kansas is absolutely capable of playing down the Cal Baptist here. So if I had to go to a different game outside of that one, I wouldn't want to because I think Louisville, South Florida is the best game of arguably the first round. That would be the game I would go to. Kansas Cal Baptist.
The other funny thing about the South Florida matchup, just from a locality standpoint, is that Brian Hodgson is from upstate New York. That's his connection with Nate Oates, also being coaching at Buffalo, and he's very much a strong candidate for the Syracuse job. And so I imagine they'll be it'll be it makes it a lot easier. We don't have to track their private jet. To know where Syracuse is at, trying to recruit him over to the Carrier Dome.
Yeah, I think that they'll send a party, as we say. They'll send a party over there. What do you think in terms of upset potential? Is there a team that you look at maybe and say this is a team that maybe can be a sleeper per se, that maybe gets maybe beyond even one game?
Yeah, I mean, look, Northern Iowa obviously is a well-coached. Ben Jacobson is a one of the better, long tenured mid-major coaches in college basketball. They've gone on runs in the past. I think about a Kansas. I know Bill Self, no, not Bill Self. Bruce Pearl brought up, he brought up Kentucky. He brought up John Calipari losing to Wisconsin in the national championship game, which I was like, that definitely did not happen.
He said this was a rematch, and I was like, what? Yeah.
It's like, I was like, I'm struggling to find the through line here.
Yeah, that was the Final Four, and it was Kentucky, and he's at Arkansas. So it was, Bruce Pearl was not good today. I'm sorry.
Greg Gard is the coach of Wisconsin now.
Right, not Bo Ryan, who was the coach back then. Yeah, there's a lot going
on. But I do think about the Ali Farouk-Manesh, Ben Jacobson, Northern Iowa team beating Bill Self back in the day, at Northern Iowa and Kansas. But they're a team that, I wonder if you're looking for a double-digit seed. I don't see it with the 7-10 matchup in terms of either one of those teams beating UConn. We'll see with UCLA in terms of, again, if Dent can get healthy. I don't see it with UCF, and I don't see it with UCLA really either. I think UConn got a pretty decent draw. And again, I honestly think if Furman can get past the first round, they might be able to go on a bit of a run.
To be honest, I think if you're looking for a sleeper, I don't think it's going to necessarily be from your double digit seed. It's going to be one of those teams knocking out Duke in the Sweet 16. And that's where I would lean to St. John's. I would say that would probably be the sleeper team and say, who's a team that, okay, forget about one first round matchup, but maybe they go on a deeper run. St. John's Duke matchup, is I think a great matchup. St. John's has the athleticism and size down low, I think, to throw multiple guys at Boozer. And they won't get into the point guard game that I think sometimes they get into that hurts them. Like they won't have to fight Duke in that way, because even if Foster is back, I think Foster's more of like a set the team up and that's it kind of thing. You don't have a dynamic guard that you got to be really afraid of.
Game manager.
Yeah, or somebody that somebody's gonna have to match that offense. Now the question for St. John's is, can they consistently get good shots against that Duke defense without having that kind of guy on their side? And that's a great question. I'd love to see the answer. That's a matchup I want to see. So that would be the team I would point to as maybe a potential sleeper team. If you say, okay, who can maybe make a run? Maybe St. John's gets on a run all the way to the Final Four. I think both Kansas and St. John's are dangerous in that regard, because Kansas, we can get to the NBA aspect of this now, maybe has maybe the best NBA prospect in this region with Darren Peterson. If you had to pinpoint an NBA prospect in this region, who would you look at? So for fans who are interested in the NBA draft, who should they be watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a region that scouts will be paying close attention to in terms of the games that are being played. They're not all in the same, not all in the same area. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned obviously Peterson has had a really tumultuous season. We've talked about him a ton on this podcast already. He's starting to now publicly say, "Yeah, I've been dealing with like full body cramp situations,
crazy body cramp things he's been talking about."
Yeah, that he's had, that he felt were kind of traumatic. And Jeff Goodman has started to, talk about that a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not, it wasn't too shocking to hear, but, it's funny. Our brother Henry joked. He was like, yeah, right as, AJ DeBansa and Boozer and Acuff started to pass him on some people's boards. Now all of a sudden we finally got an answer.
I got full body cramps.
Yeah. But in terms of like a sleeper kind of guy, I mean, to me, we talked a lot about Braylon Mullins. You were at the Big East tournament.
Yep.
He's a guy that is shot up. I wouldn't say shot up NBA draft boards. He's a McDonald American, but he's a guy that's high on a lot of draft boards. A lot of people view him as a lottery prospect. Yeah. And I haven't necessarily seen it personally yet. I think he's very raw. He's highly skilled, can shoot it. But look, the NBA, everybody can shoot it, right? Everybody's kind of highly skilled at this point. Like I want to see like what makes him a lottery guy, and so he's a guy I'm going to be watching very closely because he's gotten a lot of Reed Shepherd and kind of Knipple comparisons, some Tyler Hero stuff. I think that's a guy I'm going to be paying attention to.
Yeah. By the way, we got Big Friendly in the chat. Excited for. I don't know how you can root for Duke and UCLA. That seems like rooting for I don't know, like
the Dodgers and the Yankees.
Yeah, Dodgers and the Yankees, or you're rooting for like what, like in the NBA, Lakers and the Celtics. He's also not very happy with his Celtic jersey, by the way, either. He says it's hard to take EJ Brother seriously when he's wearing a Belts and Celtics jersey. Go Lakers.
It's a Marcus Smart jersey, by the way, so that's a Laker. It's a Laker legend.
It's a current Laker right now, even though it's a Celtic version of the jersey. Child of Big Friendly.
Not Celtic Shaq.
I actually wondered if that was Shaq for a sec. No, Kendall, when you put it on, I saw you wearing it, I was like, is that a Shaq jersey he's wearing? I was like, man, that's sad. Shaq with the Celtics was sad.
I feel so bad for Marcus Smart that, like, because of the Celtics Shaq memes, like 36 Celtics is just like, oh, that's Celtics Shaq. It was like, what?
People, especially outside of Boston, they run to Shaq, not Marcus Smart, which is really funny. Shout out to Big Friendly for watching the show. So I'm going to go to Michael Brown, who I'm very fascinated to see what his deal is. So
great name.
He's been dealing with these back spasms and this back issue. He's been in and out of the lineup. He is a fascinating prospect because the guy has explosive scoring ability. He has a 40-point game this season. He plays with an ultimate green light, it seems like, and which is kind of how Louisville gives a lot of their guys a green light. But he
in the gym range.
In the gym range and an ultimate green light. And I think if you're looking for an NBA prospect outside of Peterson and Boozer to look at, this is a guy who also very well could go into the top 10 of this draft. Certainly could be a lottery pick for sure. And also, if you're looking for somebody who unexpectedly takes over a tournament, if he can get healthy, he's a guy that has that offensive, explosive capability to maybe go on a run and become a household name by the time this tournament is over.
The question with him is kind of with his play style. There's times you watch him, you're like, this looks like Damian Lillard. Like he's pulling up from deep. He's got ISO game. He can finish on all three levels. He's athletic and dunk on guys. But then at times you're like, is he just Anthony Simons? Like, and that's still a good player, but now am I still drafting him in the top 5 or the top 10 if he's Anthony Simons? So again, if he can put together a strong tournament run, I think he can push himself into that conversation with, Caleb Wilson and Acuff in that 3, 4, 5, 6 range.
Okay, so who you have coming out of this region? I'm gonna go with Duke. I just that Sweet 16 game is a game that would scare me honestly the most. I don't. We haven't talked much about Michigan State here. I mean, I don't know how you feel about them, but I just don't know if they have enough offensive firepower. I think, and Fears has been their lead guard, and he runs a little hot and cold. Izzo, I think, runs a little hot and cold. I know he gets a lot of credit because he certainly had a lot of long tournament runs. He's also had some kind of sad flameouts too. We kind of forget about some of those. I lean that this is more likely to be like an early flameout than like a long tournament run. I didn't think they ended the season that strong, but I'm going with Duke to come out of this region. I think if they get past Kansas or St. John's, I think that they're going to have a good shot against a team like UConn or Michigan State on the back end. Who do you have coming out of the region?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I also wonder if North Dakota State might get Michigan State.
I agree.
Like Michigan State, that scares me. I don't know if they're blowing anybody out. Like I don't know if they're running away from anybody. If you don't run away from a team, like that's where it gets dicey in the NCAA tournament. But I agree. I think I'm going Duke. Again, I'm between Duke and UConn. I think both those teams have. I think that'd be a very tough matchup either way. But I think Duke's got a path that I like better than UConn. And I know I said I don't like the 7-10 matchup, but I just think Duke is going to be is a more safer bet to get past Ohio State, either Ohio State or TCU. And once you're then talking about the potential St. John's Kansas matchup, like that's going to be tough. Like I agree, that's the toughest part for Duke potentially is even getting past a St. John's or a Kansas who plays up to their competition, as you mentioned. But I think they do. I think the consistency of Cameron Boozer and the better play that we're seeing from Caden Boozer as well is I think something that, especially if they get Caleb Foster back, they get Gumba back, a more confident Caden Boozer just makes the team even more dangerous. And John Shire is such a good coach. We've seen it in the NCAA tournament now for years. His teams don't really, wet the bed, as we like to say. Like his teams, for the most part, play to their ability. So I like Duke getting out of the region.
Let's head over to the West region. This is the other side of the region. So you're talking about your number 2 seed here. So you got Arizona as the number 1 seed here. They'll have LIU. Villanova, Utah State is the second round matchup potentially for them if they get past LIU. Obviously, those games going to be played in San Diego, California. You then have what I think is a game that, I'll be honest, as someone who's kind of circled Wisconsin as a potential sleeper team, I didn't like seeing High Point as the 12 seed that they got to see. That's a very, very good team, high win total. And then you got Arkansas on the other side, too. Arkansas gets Hawaii in Portland. I'm going to go to the back end, and we'll scroll back up and kind of talk about this bracket. But this is where it was kind of crazy. I'm so used to it. It feels like every time I've watched March Madness brackets get revealed, I always got to wait till like the last minute to see Gonzaga and or St. John's get revealed. It was kind of funny to be like, first 2 brackets, I was like, oh, I had to kind of like perk up. Oh, my God, okay, we're here. It's already done. I know where my teams are playing. Yeah. So we got BYU in the first four matchup winner between Texas and NC State. You have my Zags against Kennesaw State, and then Miami versus Missouri in St. Louis. Which if I'm Miami, I'm calling somebody, being like, "What? How does a 10 seed get? What is a home game essentially?" And then you got Purdue against Queens making it for the first time. Not Queens, New York, but Queens making it for the first time for their NCAA tournament appearance. So. Initial thoughts on how the West region shook out for Arizona as the number 1 seed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is I think it's a tougher. I'm not gonna say it's a tougher bracket. I like this Arizona team a lot. Let me preface it by saying I like this Arizona team a lot. I think they got certainly got a tougher 8-9 draw than Duke got. I think either one of those teams. Villanova or Utah State could be pesky. It could be both really well coached. Both got talented players. I don't think Arizona should overlook either one of those 2 teams. And then if they've got to play Arkansas, especially, but even Wisconsin, but Arkansas in the Sweet 16, that's a Final Four level team. Like the Final Four level matchup. Doesn't mean Arkansas is gonna beat them, but they're a dangerous team that you don't want to have to face that early in the tournament if you don't have to. They've got that kind of talent. They're coming together at the right time. They're getting healthy at the right time. Carter Knox is still out, but Acuff is gonna have a week or so to get healthy. By the time you get them in the second weekend, they'll have had another week to get healthy. That's a tougher matchup if you're Arkansas, if you're Arizona. So yeah, I think they got a tougher draw, at least in the first half of the region, but they're a really good team. So, and they're going to be playing in San Diego and in San Jose. So it's like they don't have to leave the West Coast to get to the Final Four.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the top half of this definitely ended up being tough. I think that both Wisconsin and Arkansas are not easy 4 or 5 matchups either. Ironically, I think the 1 and 2 seeds that were number 1 and 2 overall, I think they ended up getting some 4 or 5s where they're probably like, what the hell, bro? So I think Arizona feels that way. I think Duke feels that way. I think I agree. I think Arkansas, because of what we see from ACUF, very curious for a John Calipari coach team. John Calipari typically hates conference tournaments. He throws games in conference tournaments. He treats them not seriously at all. It seemed like he has a team and a player that is on such an unbelievable heater. He couldn't even sabotage their ability to win a conference championship. So here they are. They win the conference championship. They've now had this, 3 games in 3 days kind of run. You could wonder about tired legs and all those different things, but ACUF is, again, he's on a heater right now that is scary for anybody that has to see him. So if you're Arizona,
it's one of those vintage Kemba, Shabazz Napier,
yeah, he's playing like that.
Walter Clayton kind of heaters.
Yeah,
and that's
and
scary.
By the way, Wisconsin also has great guards too. So I think whoever you're playing, I think you're not really thrilled about having to see in the tournament where we always talk about guard play being important. If they get past their first two games, they're going to be you're almost guaranteed to face elite guards in the Sweet 16. The age of the Banta aspect of this is going to be fascinating. They ended up landing a 6 seed, which means I think that they could very well be bounced in the first round. BYU typically, I feel like they've performed well against kind of the mid teams. Has been when they've had to face a step up in competition, especially without Ryan Saunders, where they've looked particularly worse. I would say BYU is probably fine to get past Texas or NC State. I would wonder against a matchup against Gonzaga, a team that's extremely well coached. Will they be able to match that? Now, I think that for Gonzaga, and that's my team, I didn't like seeing AJ DeBonta on the other side of that bracket. I don't think Gonzaga necessarily matches up well with, first of all, nobody matches up well with AJ. But, the archetype of,
the Grizzlies, maybe?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, the Grizzlies, the Sacramento Kings. The archetype, though, of, the big 6'8" wing. Good luck finding them. The guy Gonzaga's going to guard him. I assume that's going to be Foster. But I don't love that matchup for Gonzaga potentially, though. The problem is BYU doesn't have a lot else outside of DeBonta. That's been their issue. And Purdue, I'll tell you what, Purdue. What do you make of Purdue, Kendall? They obviously win the Big Ten championship today, beating Michigan and beating them kind of handedly. And they're starting to look like the Purdue teams that you kind of saw and went into tournaments with gaudy records and gaudy seedings. But then what usually came
preseason
with
number
that,
1 team in the country,
right? And they were preseason number 1. They kind of started to live up to that. Now, what you usually see with that is then the disappointment in March, where they get bounced maybe by a 16 seed or somewhere in the second round, and that's why I think there's a trepidation of how much do you believe in them. I tend to lean in more believing in them than maybe most people would in terms of whether or not this is the Purdue team to believe in. What do you think of kind of how the bottom of the bracket worked out?
Look, BYU is an interesting they're an interesting team because they're one of those old school, kind of like those old school Kentucky teams that would underperform but still have a lot of NBA talent and probably have more talent than the other team they're playing in almost every game in terms of high-end, top-end talent. And so, you're rolling the ball out with AJ DeBonta. If he's the best player on the floor, you gave yourself a chance to win. And he might be the best player in the entire. I'd say it's pretty. Besides ACUF, I'd say it's pretty safe to say he's the best player in the entire region, even on the college level. Maybe Braden Smith, but Braden Smith's not taking over a game like DeBonta could if he's playing at his peak. Now, again, he's a freshman. He hasn't played in an NCAA tournament before in that type of environment. BYU's not as deep, so again, they could lose to NC State or Texas. That's a really interesting coaching matchup. Either one of those two guys, Sean Miller or Will Wade, against Kevin Young.
Yes.
And then Gonzaga and BYU could be an interesting coaching matchup as well. The Purdue thing is interesting because I agree. Purdue is playing really good basketball the last couple weeks. They've kind of figured it out if they kind of really sputter in the middle of Big Ten play. Um, they've got talent. They've got experience. They've got strong guard play. They've got shooting. Oscar Clough is one of the best big men in college basketball right now, especially on the offensive end. Along with him and Kaufman, they're kind of. I mean, you see why they were the preseason number one team in the country. But at the same time, they're a team that can get beat. They're a team that can get got. And again, they've played in the Big Ten all year, and they've had performances against, like Northwestern almost got them a couple times. Like,
Yeah.
This is not a team that is going to, run away from teams necessarily, if you play the right way. And Miami is a team that has played well against some of the better teams in college basketball this season. Jay Lucas has done an excellent job in his first season. They have got a lot of talent, so that'd be a scary second weekend matchup or second round matchup. Same with even a Dennis Gates Missouri coach team. Dennis Gates coach Missouri team. They've got talent as well. Mark Mitchell's a tough guy. They've got in the front court.
He's super senior.
Like you said, they're playing. Yeah, exactly. He's an older veteran guy who's seen this level of basketball, seen at the NCAA tournament almost his entire career. And they're playing in their backyard. So, they're going to have a challenge, I think, getting to the second weekend. I'm confident in that. It's not a team that there are so many teams that I will say are pretty upset proof, like Arizona. I find it hard to believe Arizona loses to LIU for sure. And then, again, those second round teams are not going to be interesting. Villanova, Utah State, but I think they beat both of them. But Purdue, I wouldn't say is upset proof. I wouldn't say is upset proof. I also think an interesting first round matchup. And I hate to, I hate to see the stereotype or scout the jersey, but I look at Arkansas and I'm like, Calipari, just like you talked about Purdue, like these are the kind of Calipari teams that do get bounced in the first round. They do. I hate to say it. Yeah. Last year's team, they came in as a 10 and we all said like, this team's not that good, but Calipari as a 10 sometimes is is dangerous, and we saw that against Kansas and against St. John's, and even against Texas Tech, they almost won that game. Hawaii, I watched Hawaii in the Big West Championship game. They can really shoot it. They are well coached. One of the fascinating things about Hawaii, the way they play, is defensively, they play a no help brand of basketball on defense. They don't ever help. And so I wonder what that's going to look like trying to guard Darius Acuff.
Yeah, how do you guard Acuff like that? Yeah.
And whether or not, because also Arkansas is not a team, like they're kind of a team you do want to kind of send guys and rotate and force guys to make jump shots, right? You want to force Wagner and Billy Richmond and some of these guys to have to make shots to kind of win, to try and win games. But they're going to have to travel all the way out to Portland. Hawaii's going to have to travel. They got to travel anywhere they play. But if they can play anywhere in the continental United States, Portland is probably one of the 5 places they probably want to play.
They probably feel good about that. Yeah, to stay on the coast at least.
So, yeah, I mean, that's one that I look at and I think is dangerous. Also, I think High Point's also a dangerous 12 going up against Wisconsin.
I agree with that, too. Yeah, High Point has a very good front line. And I think, to me, I'm always curious about the mid-major teams that can actually beat you inside and can rebound the basketball. High Point does both of those very well. Hawaii is very interesting too, I think, because Hawaii is a team that is also pretty deep. They will comfortably play 9 guys and play them a lot of minutes. So I think when it comes to throwing multiple bodies at Acuff, a game that maybe gets up tempo against an SEC team like Arkansas, they may be equipped to play that style. And again, the travel, this is actually not going to be a horrendous travel for them too. So what typically has been a disadvantage for them, I've watched some games they played on the road this year because I'm always up late randomly, and they were playing some tough road games. They were coming out on top. So I'm actually fascinated by, I've said that I thought that Acuff was good enough to overcome usual Calipari shenanigans in March. We'll see what the test is, because again, if they get past Hawaii, I think High Point or Wisconsin, I don't think is a sleeper, as a easy game for them at all. And Yeah, how do you look at this when it comes to favorite first round matchup? What's the first round matchup for you that you stick out and say, yeah, I gotta get this, I gotta see this one?
I mentioned obviously Arkansas, Hawaii. I'm going to be paying close attention to, but outside of that one, I'll say BYU um, versus whoever wins that first four matchup against
Yeah,
between Texas and NC State. Again, I'm fascinated. Kevin Young had a really strong first showing in the NCAA tournament last year. Um, got to the Sweet 16. They had a much bigger budget this time around. Of course, you mentioned Richie Saunders getting hurt, really, kind of, sputtered their season quite a bit. But they still, even you take the payroll of the guys who are all out on the floor. Richie Saunders is a big part of their payroll, but
definitely,
take the
definitely.
payroll of the guys that will be out there. Um, it's still probably on par with NC State and Texas. I mean, getting rid of $3 million probably on your, does hurt and does affect them quite a bit. But NC State and Texas aren't your normal 11 seeds in terms of their payrolls as well. So particularly NC State, a really good coach. This team is just not been as good as I think people thought they would be and people hoped that they would be. But they have talent. Darian Williams obviously was a stud last year at Texas Tech. I'm sure his bank account's fine, but I'm also sure he's probably wondering maybe if he should have just stayed at Texas Tech.
Yeah,
But look, they've got talent. They've got a lot of guys that were at McNeese State. Kadir Copeland there. Trey Holloway. They got a pretty good team at NC State in terms of talent. So again, I think that'd be a tough matchup.
yeah, I agree. The BYU matchup I think is one to watch. Again, I will take the cliche and go to the 5-12 and go to Wisconsin High Point. Again, High Point, they have a very good front line. Wisconsin is a little banged up in the front line. Wisconsin though also has two scary guards, and I think that always kind of creates a recipe for sometimes some really big fireworks when it comes to potential upsets or potential close games. So that's a team I'm watching. I really circled Wisconsin as a team that I actually was liking coming into this tournament. This is not your grandfather's Wisconsin, or actually maybe they are, because they mentioned during the selection show this is the highest scoring Wisconsin team since the 70s, which so technically they are kind of like your grandfather's Wisconsin team. But this is not your Bo Ryan Wisconsin team or even your more recent Greg Carr teams. These are the team that they have basically flipped their entire identity. They play fast, they take a lot of
Yes.
threes, and they are a guard-driven team, which has not been how Wisconsin has played in the past. So I like this team, and I think that I kind of wonder if they end up being kind of the spoiler for watching the 8 Cup go on a longer run. But I think that High Point's a really tough first round matchup. So I'm looking at them. But you look at what Boyd and Blackwell have done. They have each had 30 points, I think, in the quarterfinal game in the Big Ten tournament. So these are explosive guards. Boyd averages 20, Blackwell averages 19. They're a dangerous pairing, and again, they take a lot of threes. So with a lot of threes comes a lot of variance in terms of what you could do offensively in a tournament. Fascinated what they may do, not just in this game, but also beyond if they do win. What do you think in terms of potential sleeper pick? If you had a sleeper team, whether it's a one round sleeper or a deep sleeper, who are you looking at in the West region?
In the West region, in terms of a sleeper, look, I look at I, I think BYU is a team that I know. Look, as a Gonzaga fan, EJ, I know
Yeah, I'm not
you
trying.
probably
Definitely
feel
not trying
pretty
to.
good.
Definitely not trying to hear
I
that.
know you're not trying to hear them as a team that might falter pretty early, but I look at BYU and I say if they could put the pieces together, we saw it in the Big 12 tournament, right? I mean, for a team that has struggled down the stretch of the regular season play in the Big 12 tournament, they played awesome. They had
Mm-hmm.
even Houston on the brink. Gonzaga's a great team, but they're that team that kind of like a Miami of Ohio. I mean, they're not Miami of Ohio, of course, but but it's like you still wonder, all right, against some of these power conference teams, what does it look like, right? Typically, it's looked really good in the NCAA tournament, so I'm not gonna disparage them, but BYU has just played such a tough schedule that I don't know if they're going to be spooked playing against a Gonzaga. Certainly don't think they'll be spooked playing against an NC State or a Texas. But the problem for BYU is just they don't have a whole lot of ways they could beat you that don't involve AJ DeMantis scoring 25 plus points. And and at this point, they did maybe when they had Richie Saunders, but without Richie Saunders, they don't necessarily have that. Kennard Davis hasn't shot it as well as they thought he would coming out of the portal. Rob Wright's been erratic. He's had games where he scored well, but he hasn't necessarily been the steady floor general that they probably hoped he would have been. But yeah, I would say BYU and I'd say Miami. I mentioned Miami as a team that I think could get really far. I'm not going to say I don't want to throw Final Four out there, but I think they could get to the Elite Eight for sure. And once you get to the Elite Eight, you're one game away from the Final Four. So I think they could beat Purdue, and I think if they do beat Purdue, again, if they've got to play BYU, if they've got to play Gonzaga even, I think they got the talent. Malik Reneau, Sheldon Henderson, Trey Donaldson's a really steady point guard.
Yes, he is.
Really big time clutch. I mean, you kind of have to wonder if you're Michigan, like, did you upgrade? I don't know if I don't know what the nature of the Trey Donaldson-Cadeau situation was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted more money. I can't imagine Miami's got money in the portal. I know you know that as a Miami football fan. But Michigan's got money. I mean, so if it's a money conversation, so I don't know if they've got an upgrade, moving on from Donaldson to Cadeau, but Miami's certainly better for it because he's been excellent all year. And he's big in these moments. We saw him last year do that. So Miami's a team that I think could be a dangerous higher seed in this bracket.
Yeah, Miami's a good call. I'll go Utah State in terms of how the bracket shook out. Very tough game against Villanova, but Utah State is one of the most efficient offensive teams in the entire country. They're 15th in field goal percentage. They're 34th in field goals made per game. Offense is not going to be an issue for them at all. So when you face a team like Arizona, where I think you kind of, even on their worst day, have to pencil them in for 75 to 70 points, can you score with them? Utah State is probably one of those teams on the 8-9 line that probably feels like they're one of the better offensive teams of the teams that we have in this grouping. So if you're talking about a team that maybe is a sleeper, could they pull off a monumental upset against Arizona? It would be a monumental upset for sure, particularly because Arizona is not just good offensively, they're also a great defensive team. But I think that would be my sleeper team because of how well they score the basketball. Again, Collins and Foslev as their guards have been phenomenal all season. And if those guys have big games, then anything can happen, obviously, in March. And they could be a duo similar to Blackwell and Boyd that you wonder if they could end up going on a big run here. So I'll go Utah State as my sleeper team for this region. NBA draft prospect to see. Who you circling?
Of course, obviously, Debansa is the easy answer. But outside of that, I mean, look, I think Koa Pete's going to be a really interesting second option as a guy that has played great all season. He's, I think, a guy that's been underrated. I mentioned it earlier on your 40 days during your 40 days 40 nights series that I think he's a guy that's kind of been underrated because he plays very much an old school, not as much of a modernized brand of basketball. He doesn't shoot it as well as maybe you'd hope. He's a little undersized, but the guy is an absolute load in the inside. And I think if they go on a bit of a run, which I think is very possible, maybe even likely, I think he's going to be a reason for that. And of course, Braden Burries as well, his teammate, is also be a guy to watch as well. So Arizona for sure is going to be a team if you're looking for NBA draft, if you're watching for NBA draft purposes, they'll be on the watch guide for sure.
Yeah, I'll stay with Arizona and go with his team. I'll go with Burries. You know how much I love Burries. I've talked about him to you off camera, and I've said it on 40 Days and 40 Nights as well. I think he's the forgotten man when it comes to the great guards in this draft. He's kind of a combo guard, but he's a willing passer. He's an excellent shooter. He can finish around the basket. He's a 3-level scorer. He's a clutch player. I've seen him hit so many clutch shots for them this year, which is why Arizona, I think, is going to be such a tough out. If you're concerned about Arizona because you've had them flame out so often, I would point to they have players, I think, with Bradley and Burries down the stretch of games I feel more confident in than some of the guys they've had in the past, Caleb Loves and guys like that, where I just think they'll be more steady in those stretches. But Burries, I think, is the real deal. I think he's one of those guys, again, there are bigger names, there are more explosive guards, both athletically and maybe with, just the overall offense because of the team he plays on. But there were several games this year where Burries looked like the most seasoned veteran on the team, and he's obviously a freshman. So he's my guy, so NBA draft prospect to watch it in this region.
Another guy really quick that I want to just give a shout out to is Billy Richmond at Arkansas. I think Billy Richmond is he's kind of gotten overlooked, of course, because of Acuff, but he's also been overlooked because he's not, a dynamic kind of scorer or shooter. But when it comes to being a Swiss Army knife, guy who could, defend almost all 5 positions, excellent in transition, pogo stick type athleticism. I think he's kind of what you want. We saw Drake Powell, who's not as good of a college basketball player as Billy Richmond, go in the first round last year. I think Billy Richmond could play as well. If they go on a run, and maybe even to Indianapolis, I think Billy Richmond could play his way into the first round of the NBA draft, maybe even higher than that.
It's funny you mentioned Richmond because if I had to go Arkansas teammate, I'd go Malik Thomas, who is another microwave scorer for them. And there have been games where Acuff's been hurt or he's been fouled out or different things, and Malik Thomas has very willingly took it over the offense. He's definitely a guy that's not shy at all. This could be a big tournament for him as well. If him and
he's got a big decision.
Yeah. Does he end up leaving for college? Again, if they go on a Final Four run, and knowing Calipari, he's not going to tell him to stay. He's definitely going to tell him to leave. So he's a player I also think would look at in this region. Who do you have coming out of here?
This region, I'm wishy-washy between Arkansas and Arizona. Okay. If you're in any of my NCAA tournament bracket challenges, don't expect my answers now to be binding.
I agree with that.
Don't.
Yes, I agree with that. We're doing this literally right after the bracket came out. There's more research to be done, more analysis to be had. Injury reports are going to be very important for some of these teams. So, yes, I totally agree with that.
Right now I am leaning Arkansas. I think Arkansas gets by Arizona, and if they do, I'm not loving the second half of this bracket. I am loving it if I'm an Arkansas fan, but I'm not loving it in general. But look, Gonzaga's a really well-coached team. Purdue's a really well-coached team as well, but I'm going to go with Arkansas right now. It's also very dangerous to pick. It's always easy to pick the team that won the today, right? The team that wins the conference championship on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, you jump to them.
Yeah, Purdue and Arkansas.
And it usually
and
never,
Florida.
unless it's Izzo, it usually doesn't go well too. Like if you run to that team, it does. They usually always end up losing in Sweet 16.
I think Florida won it right last year, the SEC championship.
Yes, and they won the national championship.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Arizona. Staying chalk here. I've said all season I thought Arizona was the best team in college basketball. I still feel like they're the best team in college basketball. I think they're deeper than Duke. They're just as physical. Maybe they don't defend quite as consistently, but the capability I think is there. This is again a tough draw. I think when it came to potentially our Arkansas Sweet 16 matchup. Again, I don't even love a Wisconsin matchup just because of the guard play, but I think Arizona with the size in the middle, with Crevis, and then you combine that again with Burries and Bradley, and then you mentioned Cole Pete, who's just a glue guy. He just whatever needs to be done on the floor. Sometimes it may mean he gets 20. Sometimes it may mean he gets 11 rebounds and guards the other team's best player. I love his glue guy-ness of this team. They're young, but they don't play young. That's why I'm not as concerned about them. I also think they did a good job of balancing both freshmen and older guys on this team too. So I believe in Arizona all year. I'm not going to run away from them now. So I'll say that they're the team that I would put in that spot for the trip to Houston here. So let's head over to the Midwest region. So this means this will be the winner. Whoever wins this region will play the winner of the West region. So you got Michigan here as the team that is on this region. We learned today that this actually would have been flipped, or at least the terms of the seeding. We learned today Michigan actually lost a spot in the bracket by losing today. Arizona would have been 3, Michigan would have been 2. So Michigan got hurt a little bit in terms of, I guess, how the matchups were going to shaking out. But I don't know if they did when you look at the region. So let's look at it real quick. So you got Michigan. They'll place the winner of UMBC and Howard. You got Georgia, St. Louis. These games are going to be played in Buffalo. You'll have then Texas Tech and Akron and Tampa. I will just give a brief little thing. I think that is a potential barn burner there. Alabama, Hofstra. Also, I think a very interesting matchup. Very curious to see these 5-12, 4-13 matchups. Those teams woke me up when I saw those teams compare with each other. And then on the flip side, in the bottom half of this region, sorry, I covered that. Bottom half of this region, you have Tennessee versus the winner of Miami, Ohio versus SMU. We just talked about Miami, Ohio earlier. You have Virginia, a red-hot Virginia team versus Wright State. And then you have Kentucky, Santa Clara. Shout out to the WCC. They have 3 teams in the tournament this year. And Iowa State versus Tennessee State. Kendall, initial thoughts on the region and how it looks for your number 1 seed Michigan Wolverines.
Look, Michigan maybe hasn't played as well as they were prior to the Duke game. They coming into the Duke game, they were playing extremely well. They lose that game. They've still looked like a really good team, of course. But the Big Ten is tough, and they've played some games that have been closer, lost a couple. Can they be beat? Certainly not by Howard or UMBC. Shout out to Howard. But
shout out to UMBC. You want to talk about some history being made? 16 teams beating the 1.
Yeah, I know. Disrespectful for me to not give UMBC the shout out. But
hey,
I
got no problem with that.
There you go. That was the that was the thought process. But no, I mean, look, Georgia in St. Louis is an interesting 8-9 game. I think St. Louis, just like Utah State, is one of those really well coached mid majors that run really good stuff on offense. That's the kind of team that is pesky. That if I'm Michigan, I don't necessarily want to have to play. Georgia is an SEC team that's got size and has athleticism. They're not necessarily a team that you'd love to play as well, but that's the kind of team they have had little trouble with throughout the year. They've played those teams in the Big Ten, and they've gotten past them. It's a team like St. Louis that would be interesting to me because that's a different kind of team that they've played. But to me, I think the team that scares me the most for Michigan is still Alabama. At least in that quadrant, which makes sense given they're the 4 seed, obviously. But
sure.
Texas Tech is just gonna be tough without Christian Anderson. Christian Anderson, it was a former Michigan point guard commit under Juwan Howard, and so their fans probably know him pretty well. But it's he's gonna have to really put them on their back. Put Texas Tech on his back because, and look, they're not a one-man team. They weren't a two-man team, but they were very top-heavy with him and JT Toppin. So to take JT Toppin out of the equation, they've done pretty well for themselves without him. People thought the whole ceiling would fall down after Toppin got hurt, but they've Christian Anderson has elevated his play even more so than the kind of All-American level he was playing at during the season, and the rest of these guys have sort of stepped up in JT Toppin's absence. But again, Akron's a tough 12. I mean, that's one of the tougher 12s. Might be the toughest 12 I think in this entire tournament. And you're playing shorthanded. You've got to, and if you get past Akron, then you've got to play an Alabama team with 2 really dynamic guards in LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway, both experienced, steady. And guys that can score it. So yeah, I think Alabama's the most dangerous team, and I think Alabama can beat Michigan. I'll be honest. I don't know if I'm picking that one yet, but I'm I'm definitely earmarking that as a 1 seed, 4 seed matchup that I think is dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be Johnny Come Lately on Michigan, but I'm starting to become more and more worried about Michigan. The more I watch them, the more I kind of look at this. I'll be honest. I'll jump the gun here. Like, I am wondering if a St. Louis Michigan upset ends up being the monumental story of like the first weekend. St. Louis is not only one of the best offensive teams in terms of field goal percentage and 3-point percentage, both in top five. They also are the best defensive team in the country when it comes to field goal defense. So you have an elite defensive team and an elite offensive team. Now Michigan prevents very unique challenges because they have a 7'3" guy, and not just 7'3". They play basically a front line of all NBA size guys. So that makes them tricky, and scoring against them, good luck. But I also think that St. Louis could also win a rock fight against them too, potentially. So I'm a little worried about Michigan, to be honest. I'm worried about the potential St. Louis second round matchup. And I'm worried about this 4-5 matchup for them too. You know how much I love LeBaron Philon. Alabama's a little weird. They had a weird season. There were stretches where it looked like they were maybe one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country, and then the SEC and the dogfight that it is, they kind of came back to the mean a little bit. But then I thought they finished pretty strong to end the season. I love again the Akron matchup. Akron has great guard play. Akron Texas Tech is just going to be. That's another. We'll get to. I mean, we're doing kind of it all in one thing, but we want to talk about great first round matchups. I told you weeks ago. I know people are just writing off Texas Tech. I watched them go into that quote-unquote Hill and Magic and stare it in the face and walk out with a pretty easy W. They have really kind of they've stood their ground when it came to losing JT Toppin in a way that I thought that they would kind of implode. Christian Anderson is probably one of the most underrated point guards in the entire country. Atwell can play, Watts can play, Petty's a great shooter. Like they got plenty of offense. The offense is not going to be the problem for them. I guess the question will be, can they consistently get interior scoring without Toppin? It's going to rely on it being a perimeter game, which is why I think that Akron game is so fascinating. Why I think it's potentially a coin flip game. So really excited about that matchup. When you get to the bottom side of the region, Iowa State's another team that I was high on at points in the season, and they've also kind of sputtered. Do I kind of chalk it to a team that knows this is about March Madness for them? They're a seasoned team, a team that's been together for a while, and maybe you kind of get bored with the tough Big 12 regular season? Or are there real issues to actually be concerned about with Iowa State? I actually was a little surprised they landed on a 2. I thought they may get dinged a little bit for some of those late losses, but I think the committee wanted to give credit to the Big 12 being a super brutal conference. But I'm very fascinated by this for Michigan. I think this is, I'll tease immediately. This is where I don't think I'm going to have number 1 seed getting through.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, that bottom half of the bracket is an interesting one as well. Iowa State is just really well coached. They're very much a well-oiled machine. I love Nolan Smith. Shout out to Nolan Smith coaching Tennessee State. It's just a tough matchup. I like Nolan Smith, but I can't imagine them getting past Iowa State. Although Iowa State has historically had some weird moments in the NCAA tournament. But Kentucky Santa Clara is a very interesting matchup. That is going to be, Kentucky fans will be on the edge of their seat.
Mark Pope was not happy to see a mid-major at large show up on the other side of the on the other side of that bracket as a matchup. Yeah, because
that's
Kentucky fans will assume they should just walk right over Santa Clara, and if they lose, it's going to be bedlam in a bad way.
Yes, and he knows Mark Sendek from the West Coast Conference, I'd imagine, and knows that program, so that should help a little bit. But we saw, last year they did pretty well for themselves, but obviously BYU a couple years ago loses to Duquesne in the first round. He doesn't want to have that reputation of falling the first. Of course, it's a 7-10 matchup, but of course, like you said, it's Kentucky versus Santa Clara. It's the $20 million roster, as everybody has, dubbed them. versus a team with maybe $2 million in NIL, whatever they've got. So that's going to be the conversation. And this is a really good, well coached Santa Clara team. Played Gonzaga pretty tough. Beat St. Mary's. This is going to be an interesting matchup for sure. And of course, I'll be honest, I don't think Miami of Ohio is going to beat SMU.
Interesting.
They'll have to go see their point guard, Edwards, SMU. He's got to get healthy. They claim they said he is going to be available for the NCAA tournament. Was that posturing just to send the message to BJ Edwards, if he was just to send the message to the committee that he's going to be there. He wasn't.
Put us in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just to say like, oh, don't worry, we have no injuries. But they've played better when he's been out there, and he's been hurt, and they've kind of struggled a little bit. Boopie Miller is a really big time guard at SMU. I actually think that they're kind of an interesting matchup for even Tennessee as a 6'11". And look, they're an ACC team. Kind of weird to say they're an ACC team, but they've seen Virginia already. I think that they're a team that could be pesky as even an 11 seed. But a potential UVA Tennessee second round matchup is also a fun one.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Here, when it comes to best first round matchup here, I said it before, but I'll go Texas Tech Akron. Like I said before, I think that you got dynamite guard play on both sides. I think you have a game that Akron will feel comfortable with because there's no JT Toppin, which means this becomes a guard game. Now, again, good luck against Texas Tech's guards, but I do feel like that's probably a game that's going to be more their speed in terms of what to expect. So when I think of potential of that being a potential upset game also, or just an overall highly competitive game, I like Texas Tech and Akron as a game to watch. It's probably the best game in this region. For you, Kendall, what's the team that you're looking at in terms of best game in the first round of this Midwest region?
To me, I think best game of the first round. It's tough. Like the 8-9 is always funny because you always feel like one of them's gonna get fed to the one seed anyway. I really do want to see more of the St. Louis team. Not a team I got to catch a ton during the regular season, but obviously Josh Schertz is an elite coach, certainly an elite offensive mind in college basketball. Robbie Avila is a big time center.
Fan favorite too, Mr. Goggins.
Yeah, fan favorite as well. It's a tough matchup in the second round potentially if he's got to go against Michigan's front court. In terms of first round matchups, I'll go back to that Kentucky Santa Clara matchup. I talked about it, but I just think this is gonna be that's a high pressure situation. Like of the first round matchups, of course, every high end seed, top seed is has a little bit of pressure, but because they don't want to lose in the first round. But if you're talking about a coach that has the most to lose from a first round loss, it's easily Mark Pope. There's another guy that we'll talk about in this last region that also I think has a lot to be coaching for. But I think it's Mark Pope. I think if they lose this game, which again, it's not necessarily totally fair because it's a 7-10 matchup. That's not really much of an upset. But if they lose, I think he starts next season squarely on the hot seat. Versus if they win and then they lose to Iowa State in St. Louis, I mean St. Louis will still have more Kentucky fans, but they lose to Iowa State, I think you say, look, we just we didn't put together the roster we needed, and whatever. But Iowa State's a great team. Hold your head high. You lose to Santa Clara in almost any fashion, and the walls are gonna come off. And so I don't. That becomes a really tense situation. We've seen that with Kentucky. We mentioned the Calipari, kind of the first round, upsets. Were those a factor or a product of John Calipari, or are those a product of Big Blue Nation and the pressure
Yeah.
of playing in Kentucky when you're playing one of these small teams and these small seeds, knowing that they're playing against Kentucky, like, is that a factor as well? I mean, we'll find out. I mean, if
Yes, we will.
Arkansas hammers Hawaii and Kentucky loses Santa Clara, you might change the narrative a little bit. But I'd say Kentucky Santa Clara is a very interesting one.
What do you think about in terms of a sleeper? Is there a team that you look at and say whether it's a massive first round upset or a lower seed maybe going on a deeper run that you feel like people should look at and say this is a team that you got to keep an eye out for?
I mentioned it. I think SMU is a team as an 11 seed that could go on a run. Look, they've got a tough 2 seed that they're matched up against in Iowa State that doesn't really lose to bad teams.
Yeah.
Not say SMU's a bad team, but doesn't really lose to teams that are considerably worse than them. So that's what makes Iowa State kind of a tough 2, potentially. But again, they've got really good guard play. They've got size. They played well all year. Look, the ACC is not great, and they really struggled at the end of the season. Again, they lost like 4 or 5 games in a row to end the regular season. BJ Edwards has been hurt, but prior to that, they were going to be a team that was going to be a 6 or a 7 seed potentially if they would have finished out the season the way that they started it. But they didn't, and now they're in 11. But Tennessee is not. I think Tennessee is beatable. I think UVA is beatable. They lost to UVA by 4 early in the season. I believe in Charlottesville, so that's a team that they could beat. And I think from a talent perspective and a roster perspective, they can match up. So I don't love this region in terms of Cinderellas necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I look at SMU and they're not a Cinderella, but they're an 11 seed that I think could go on a bit of a run.
Yeah, I mean, listen, funny, you're going SMU and I'm going on the flip side. I'm going with Miami, Ohio. Again, this is a team that is not accustomed to losing. They lost 1 game all season. I know it was against quote-unquote bad competition, but if we're going to talk about how dangerous Akron is, we have to put respect on the team that won the regular season league in that conference and the team that, again, was undefeated up until the conference tournament. Now, this is a team that has lived dangerously all season, and that's probably the part that makes people maybe question the record more than you would normally a team that was 30-0 before losing their last game. I think you look at them and say, well, is this a 30-0 but like they are lucky? Because I watched some of these games. I watched them play on the road against Ohio in an overtime game where they gave up 1,000,000 points and it was nip and tuck. It could have went either way for most of the game, and they find a way to win. And there were a lot of games like that during the schedule. But I actually do value your ability to rack up wins in tough environments, tough places to play. Once you become now a storyline in college basketball, people know they're not taking you lightly anymore. You're still able to rack up wins. That team, they're battle tested. They've been in the kind of environments that they will see in March, which will be less probably people now trying to see them lose, and now people are rooting for them to win. And I think they'll get the crowd behind them in Dayton, which is why I think they'll move on past SMU. And I think I have not liked Tennessee all year. That has been one of the teams I've kind of circled pretty much all season is they got the right first round matchup. If there's anybody I have any respect for, I'm having them out of here. I don't think that they're consistent offensively, and they just to lose to Vanderbilt. I know Vanderbilt's a great program. Lose them 3 times this year, and I think they didn't feel like they were really competitive in either of those games. I think they've been overrated. I'm not that high on them. So I think you could be seeing a first 4 win, a first round matchup. And Virginia's tough. This is not your typical, this is also not your grandfather Virginia to fill the Wisconsin line, because this is not a Virginia team that's going to be, we don't score the basketball, we play slow pace. They definitely have changed their identity a little bit. But Miami, you're talking about the best offensive team or second best offensive team in the country. Second in points scored, first in field goal percentage. You know me, man. Find me the teams that score in March. Like when I'm looking for teams that can be sleepers, I don't want the team. Yes, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. You have the teams that are kind of like defensive teams that just stymie people and they get them in these low-scoring games and they win. I think the Cinderellas that I think of in terms of who were really good, maybe outside of Butler, that was one team that definitely was like a half-court kind of team. But usually the teams that do damage are the teams that can score, either score at a really high level or speed you up in a way that makes the game uncomfortable. So Miami, Ohio, I think can do both of those things. So I'm going with the Red Hawks as the sleeper. I think they win the Tennessee game, and they could potentially beat Virginia in the second round match as well.
Fascinating. Miami of Ohio is going to be really fun. I mean, seeing them in that first four game against SMU is going to be really fun. Uh, litmus litmus tests for you know for the future of these mid-major teams that don't really play anybody. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious. One of the things I will say is when you take that first loss, it should lift the weight off your shoulders, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're
I
not,
think it was important for
and of
them.
course they're going to have a target on their back, but it's for the great teams and even for the teams that maybe we don't view as championship contenders. Like when you've gone on these long streaks, if you can take a loss, you can afford it, and clearly, I guess they were able to afford it barely. I mean, they have to now play in a
Barely, yeah.
playing game, but but they were able to afford a loss. If you can afford a loss, you might as well get one because it wakes these guys up, right? It tells them now, like, as invincible and immortal as you guys have felt the last month, you guys have won a lot of games you probably shouldn't have won. You've stolen a lot of these games that you probably shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
Now you're in a position where you finally have seen that yes, if we don't play the right way, we can lose games. Right
Yeah.
now, we're going to play the toughest team we've played all year, in our backyard, albeit. We'll see how that plays out, but it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it will be, and also will they be able to defend when they start to see? Because I think defense has been up and down from this year. Will they be able to defend when they see the big dogs that they're going to be seeing in this region? When it comes to NBA talent, kind of what's some NBA talent you're looking at in terms of guys you want to see in NBA prospects to circle?
The first guy that comes to mind in terms of a high end guy, I know you like LeBaron Philon a lot. So
Yeah,
if you're going to talk about him, I'll let you talk about him. But I'll talk about Nate Ament at Tennessee, a big time, prospect who is very much in that mold of your, Jabari Smith, your Evan Mobley, like guy that people
yeah.
think is kind of a,
Jaden
looks
McDaniels.
like Tarzan, plays like Jane, yeah, exactly, Jaden McDaniels type guy that you feel like, man, like this guy physically he's got all the tools to be, Kevin Durant or be, one of these
Yeah,
guys that's a 6'10" unicorn type guy. But he's kind of like Jabari Smith, where I don't think he is as raw as maybe he's billed as, right?
yeah,
He's had put together quite a few performances this season, even in the SEC tournament, where he's put up performances where he's had 25 plus 30 point games. Like, he is a really good player right now who Tennessee needs to play really well for them to go on a run, and he has that ability. Really skilled, again, can score on all three levels, advanced, um, and good physical tools as well. So I'm excited to see him. And then a guy who's more of a sleeper prospect is Milan Momcilovic at Iowa State.
yeah.
Might be the best shooter in college basketball. He's a big who really advanced offensive game. Kind of reminds me of like Doug McDermott when he was at Creighton in terms of like the variety of scoring packages that this guy has. And again, just an excellent shooter. Not had a ton of draft buzz. It might be a guy that'll come back, especially in this NIL era. But if he did come out, I think this is a guy that could even find his way into the first round with his ability to shoot it, his size, and his high skill level.
Yeah, I like him on Silovich. He is a sniper. When he enters the draft, very well could be the best shooter in this draft. So again, another reason why I've been very high on Iowa State this year. Yeah, I mean, you know how much I love LeBaron Philon, so I'll go with him here for this conversation. You want to feel like who is the Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford archetype kind of guy in this draft? I think Philon fits that bill. Is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? I don't know. Give him the ball and let him go. That's what I would say I would do. Does he a starter? He's a bench guy. I think it doesn't really matter. He's going to come in and get his own. He is fearless. Another guy can score on three levels, has deep range, has a good mid-range game, handle is tight, and he's in a perfect system. Like playing in a Nate Holt's system, I think is going to get him very ready for whatever his NBA role will be. And I think because he's one of those rare guys where I think when you play his style, sometimes it's kind of tricky because it's like, is this guy going to be able to have this kind of green light wherever he goes, or is he going to, like, a lot of these teams is like, hey, he can come in and fill a role. But I think people have seen, even though he's a star, he's the best player on Alabama. I think they've seen the archetype for like, this guy can be my six-man microwave guy off the bench probably next year, where maybe he's not a starter, but he's the stars of the guys coming off the bench, and he's coming in, bringing in energy. He could play this same style that he's played at Alabama, but just in a more limited time frame against NBA backups, where I think he would have a field day. So I've loved this guy's game. Again, Burries has been kind of the I think he's been the forgotten man of the top guys, but I think of just the first round guards in general. I think that Phylon, who could have went to the NBA last year and kind of on the fence about whether or not he would enter, then because I think all these other freshman guards came in, we kind of definitely forgot about him. But if you've watched Alabama play this year, he's been impossible not to circle and be like, man, this guy can freaking go. I love Phylon's game, so he'd be my guy for a potential NBA sleeper.
Yeah, I love Phylon too. I mean, he like he said, really dynamic, and if they can go on a run, which I think is very possible, he gets to play his way into maybe even the top 10. Like, it's going to be hard to crack the top 7 or 8. It feels pretty static at this point, but there's a there's an opening at 9, 10, 11 range where if he goes on a run, he might be that next tier of guards that gets drafted.
He also would scare me as an opponent. He's extremely fearless. He hits big shots. Like I would not want to be in a close game and he's on the other side. That would not feel like a good environment to be in, a comfortable environment to be in, because who's staying in front of him? How are you taking away him getting to his spots? And he's very comfortable shooting essentially from anywhere. So very, very tough cover. Who do you got coming out of this region? I think for me, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go Iowa State. I got to be real. I can't tell you that I've seen the Iowa State team I wanted to see come into this tournament, but Iowa State is a team that I've circled all year as someone that I've liked. I think the bottom of the region is like played out very favorably for them, and I think they got a favorable seeding as a 2. And I think that the bottom of the region they got was also favorable. So I think they get to the Elite 8. So look, there's tough teams on the other side, but are these teams getting through? Is Michigan getting through? Is Alabama getting through? I think there are landmines for the top half, more landmines for the top half of this region, I think, than any other region, in my opinion. So I don't know if they have to see any of these top teams in the other side of the region. Like, if they were playing against Tech or playing against Georgia or St. Louis, like, would that shock me? And no, it would not shock me. So, and I think if they did have to face a team like Michigan, again, their ability to shoot the ball from distance with Momcilovic, you have a point guard in Lipsy who can run your offense, get you consistent good shots. I'm going to kind of put away some of the ugly games, ugly loss against Kansas, ugly loss against Arizona. I put those to the side and say that's a team that maybe just is just getting ready for March, and say that this is a team that came into this year, in my opinion, is one of the best teams in college basketball. I still think that they are. So I'll go Iowa State coming out of this one as a 2 seed.
Yeah, I will go with I'll go with Alabama. I think Alabama beats Michigan. I agree. I think Iowa State gets to the Elite 8, and I think that's not a good matchup for Iowa State personally.
Yeah,
I think I'm not sure if they're a team that I want playing the game into the 80s and the 90s potentially. Alabama's got to you obviously make shots and they got to play well, but
right.
But if they can get a really high scoring, high fast paced game going, I don't know. Like, I don't think they're gonna get blown out. I don't think they're gonna run away with it, Iowa State. So, I like Alabama. I think coming out of this region tentatively.
Yeah, I'm actually curious about Alabama in that first round matchup against Hofstra. Hofstra is a very good defensive team. They do have good guards, and I assume Speed Class is going to try to know how to take the air out of the ball in a game like that. So, and they have the guards who won't turn the ball over to control the game. So I think that Alabama. It's one of those games where like I think it's either an Alabama blowout or like look out. This is like a 1 or 2 score kind of game if they really are able to keep Alabama in the half court. Because if they do, I think Oscar has the guard play to efficiently score enough offense against an Alabama team whose defense is very suspect to make it interesting. So I think that first round matchup, I think, again, those 5-12, 4-13, I think both of those games are very, very live. I think I saw, the lines that come out, I think I saw Hofstra was a 13.5-point dog, which honestly is not that bad for a 13 seed. Like, that's not that many points. 13 seeds, I expect them to be north of 15 points. So interesting matchup there. But yeah, I get the Alabama love. The question about Alabama to me is it's kind of like what we see with NBA teams is their style of play makes it to where if they're playing, like they can't win if they don't play well, especially when you're playing with college kids. Like if they're not shooting well, they're cooked because they don't have the skill level to kind of do the other thing. They don't have the to do other things necessary to maybe find a way to kind of steal these games. So they have to play extremely well, but Phylon and Holloway as, again, guards controlling the pace and, again, clutch shooters. It's a good team. It's a very good team. I can totally see why you would want Alabama and see them as a team that could potentially get to the Final Four here. Okay, lastly, last one, man, before we get out of here. Been a fun one so far. By the way, this has been our March Madness New Generation Media bracket breakdown. Of course, if you're enjoying this in many ways is a little tease of what we do with New Generation Sports Talk, which we'll be doing sports talk episodes coming up soon. You've obviously seen 40 Days Before Your Nights, where I talk a lot about sports as well. This is me and Kendall talking sports about anything that's going on. And if you love this, you want to make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. New Generation Media on YouTube. Make sure you, of course, subscribe to the podcast, New Generation Podcast Network, where you can get all episodes we produce, including this live stream that we'll put out there as well. Make sure you go to New Generation Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Okay, so wrapping up. Let's head to the Dirty South. South region here. Florida, #1 seed in the region. They have Prairie View A&M or Lehigh. Shout out to Lehigh. That's a Lehigh Valley team. Obviously, we've been based in the Lehigh Valley area, so much love to Lehigh Valley representing Bethlehem, PA, and getting to the dance here. First time since C.J. McCollum was lacing them up for Lehigh. You got Clemson, Iowa. That'll be the other side of that 1-8-9 situation. Then you go to Oklahoma City. You'll have Vanderbilt versus McNeese. Nebraska versus Troy. I told Kendall a bunch about how I saw Troy, and I actually was really impressed with them. I'm actually really concerned about Nebraska's ability to maybe get their first win ever in their entire history. And then you got North Carolina, VCU, and South Carolina. You want to talk about definitely a good regional battle there. Plenty of fans from both sides be able to get to that one. That should be fun. Illinois and Penn. Shout out to the Penn. And Andrea made sure I wanted to say this right. Not just the Quakers, the Penn Fighting Quakers. My fiance is a Penn grad, so she wanted to make sure I reference them as the Fighting Quakers, not just the Penn Quakers. They face Illinois in Greenville. I call them the Fighting Fran McCaffreys. And then finally, wrap up the bracket, St. Mary's versus A&M, and Houston against Idaho. That will be in Oklahoma City. So, Kendall, Florida, #1 team in the region. How did you think of how this broke down for the final #4 seed?
First of all, the Fighting Fran McCaffreys, the Fighting Fran McCaffrey sounds like a scarier mascot than the Fighting Quake. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Fighting Fran McCaffreys is a what's it called? Not an oxymoron, but it's redundant. Fighting Fran McCaffreys is you call them just the Fran McCaffreys. Fran McCaffrey's always fighting somebody.
Look, Florida's tough, man. I mean, they're playing in Tampa. They're a really well coached team. They obviously defending national champions. They didn't start off the season well at all. But the last 2 months they've been, arguably the best team in the country, honestly. But they've been one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. That's why they've been able to lock up this 1 seed. Look, I really like Iowa. I don't think that's going to be an easy 1-9 matchup if that comes about. Iowa's a weird team that could lose to anybody. but
Yes.
I feel like they can kind of beat anybody. So I don't know if they're going to beat Clemson, but if they do, I think they'd be a dangerous dangerous 9 seed that I don't know if you want to play. Um, but look, I think this is kind of a sneaky tough quadrant for Florida. Vandy is a team that obviously again they've seen in the SEC, another team that can kind of beat anybody because they score it at an extremely high level, they shoot it at an extremely high level, and if you get into a shootout in the NCAA tournament, you can be beat. It's a 1-game elimination type of situation. So, I look at Vandy as a team that could beat Florida, and Nebraska is another team that when it plays its best basketball, which it has not, over the last month.
Yeah.
But when it played its best basketball, has also played as well as anybody in college basketball, and it's given Michigan fits and given Purdue fits. And so I don't know for a fact Florida gets to the Elite Eight if it comes to that for against any of these teams. I think they beat Clemson, but outside of Clemson, I think Iowa, Vandy, and Nebraska could all beat Florida in a game.
Well, Florida just lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, and
Yes.
I was a little surprised by that result. And they didn't get beat; they got kind of handled, and that was a little surprising. Now
Yes.
they had been red hot, so you can't win every game. But and it was a home game for Vanderbilt because the tournament's played in Nashville. All in all, still kind of a surprising result that they got out. They got bounced so early in the SEC tournament. I look at this region. They're the number 4, number 1 seed, so it's going to be hard. There's no ways around it. Again, Vanderbilt as a 5 seed, I think Vanderbilt is very dangerous. That's a very good team, and again, they do have a win over Florida, so that becomes tricky. You mentioned Iowa and Bennett Sturts, who we can talk about NBA draft prospects, but this is a guy who also could be looked at as a first-round pick as a guard. Iowa's going to be tough. Nebraska is one of the most potent offensive teams in all college basketball. So that's not easy. They started the year 20-0. That's your 4 seed. I think the bottom half of the region is not that tricky outside of, Houston is there. I think Houston, I feel very good about the bottom of the region, I think, in terms of how it played out. But
Absolutely.
But I think for Florida, for their side of it, tricky to just get out of that side. And then if Houston takes care of business, Houston waiting for you at the end, that's an absolute dogfight. So it definitely, they're going to have to earn it, and that's fine. They're the defending national champion, so I don't think they'll shy away. I think Florida's been on an absolute tear in recent weeks. I think they've been the most impressive team in college basketball for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So they got to earn it. They're not going to be afraid to earn it, but it's not going to be easy for them.
No, I mean, when you look at this second half of the bracket, I mentioned Mark Pope having a lot of pressure. I think Hubert Davis has a ton of pressure as well. Obviously, you don't have Caleb Wilson, so that takes a little bit of pressure off of their situation, but same kind of deal where you're playing in Greenville, South Carolina against, little old VCU.
Who we learned today, by the way, that would not have made the tournament if they lost today.
Yeah, people thought they'd be in, but they had to win and get in. Phil Martelli Jr., first year, did a really good job and, took care of business. I think that's a dangerous matchup in general. And I think that's a game North Carolina, again, Hubert Davis really needs to win just for the narrative. But that's a fascinating matchup in that first round. I mean, Illinois, Penn. I think all 3 of those first 3 games are all very fascinating. Illinois, Penn is that's an old school Big Ten matchup, between Brad Underwood and Fran McCaffrey. So I mean, those are coaches that know each other extremely well. Both, obviously really, well-oiled machines offensively. Both programs. Illinois obviously is. I think they're really underrated. I mean, they're 3 seeds, so it's not like it's not like I'm not saying they should be a 1 seed, but I think they're dangerous. They don't have like a go-to guy. I think they wanted that to be Stojakovic, and he hasn't necessarily, brought over the 20-point per game kind of score he was at Cal. But but in general, they just have a lot of offensive weapons, and they're very, very much a well-oiled machine offensively. But Penn is dangerous, man. Again, Frank McCaffrey is an elite offensive coach.
Yes,
We
he is.
see Jay Power today in the Ivy League championship game go out and get 44.
Yeah, I
Big
didn't
time.
I didn't think he had that kind of
big
game in him.
time. Yeah, I mean, he's a former 5-star McDonald American, played at Duke. Was okay, but couldn't really get off the bench, and transfers to UVA and kind of regressed even with the UVA. But what's fascinating about the story with him in Penn is that McCaffrey recruited him really hard to try and go to Iowa coming out of high school, and obviously he now gets to coach him at Penn, and he's starting to live up to the 5-star billing that he had a couple years ago. It's might be the most dangerous mid-major player in this entire tournament, given his pedigree, who's coaching him, and what McCaffrey's. Yeah, exactly. He's kind of a ringer. Like, this guy isn't a guy that should be playing on a 14 seed. A 5-star, 6'8", can shoot it. One of the best shooters in college basketball, but also can get to the basket. Like, this is not a guy that should be playing at Penn normally. So, and again, McCaffrey knows how to use those guys. Has done it for the last 10, 15 years at Iowa. So it's an interesting, dangerous matchup. But and then again, St. Mary's against A&M is also an interesting matchup. When you talk about a complete, contrast of styles with Bucky McMillan playing at a breakneck pace at Texas A&M versus the St. Mary's team that obviously doesn't try to run the ball.
No, Randy Bennett plays in the half court. Yeah.
Yes, he's going to beat you in the half court, but they've got a little bit more dynamic scoring in the backcourt this year with Mikey Lewis, who's kind of taking a step up from even where he's been.
Man, he killed Gonzaga in their regular season finale. Second half, he was.
Yes. He's a guy that can fill it up, and he's the guy that if they can get past A&M, which I think they can, against Houston, like Houston's also going to be a team that's not going to try and run you out to the gym. If Mikey Lewis can really get going, who knows? Like, St. Mary's has not really shown themselves well. they're kind of a weird program because they, we all love St. Mary's. Nobody thinks Randy Bennett's a terrible coach. Yeah. They always get seeded, as a 5, 6, 7 seed, sometimes even higher. But I feel like they never ever get to the second weekend. If they do get to the second weekend, they never get past the Sweet 16.
Yeah, they've never been past Sweet 16. I think Omar Sanhan, you remember him? That's an old school name right there.
Yeah, super agent now.
Yeah. I know, crazy, right? Like, I think he got them to the Sweet 16. He might be the only guy that ever get them to the Sweet 16. And they've had pretty good players. They had Matthew Dellavedova, obviously. They've had stars there. But, they seem to be capped. Like, maybe they could win a first-round game, but that's it. So, again, if you're Houston, I think you feel really good about, like, St. Mary's being on the other side and be like, ooh, okay.
Yeah. But, again, it's a weird matchup for them, right?
It is a weird matchup.
Because, they play a similar style.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and you do get... I think the difference, though, will be St. Mary's, while they like playing the half court, I wouldn't call them a physical team. And that's what they're going to face when they face Houston. They're going to face an extremely physical team. And that comes with a different level than what they've seen typically in the West Coast Conference. And I think that if you match their half-court efficiency with physicality, that's when I think you usually can get them out of their game. So now this Houston team is a little younger and not as physical as maybe previous teams, but I mean that's like saying this like Alabama Nick Saban defense is a little younger than previous Alabama Nick Saban teams. All right, well, it's Alabama Nick Saban. I think they're going to be play some defense. I think that's kind of how I would assess Kelvin Sampson's team this year. Favorite first round matchup. Here's a good ones. There's a bunch of them. There's two that I really like. I'm trying to see where I'll go Nebraska-Troy. I'll go Nebraska-Troy because I told you about this Troy team, man. I watched Troy in their championship game, and I was extremely impressed with how they play. They got two brothers on the team that, and I don't mean two black guys. I mean the actual actual brothers. They have two brothers that are on the team.
I was like, wow, they only got two brothers on the team, and they're a 13
Troy. Yeah, Troy. I don't think it's Troy. No, so they got they had two brothers. They had Cooper and Kobe Campbell. Both their dad played or was a high school coach, and then became the assistant coach in this team. Two guys that are really like well seasoned, like very like typical coaches kid kind of players. And then they have what has been described as the Mexican Luka. They have this kid Victor Valdez, who he plays like a Mexican Luka. He's a double machine. He's averaging 14 and 10, even though he's only about 6'6", 6'7". He leads the team in assists, and he's a jack of all trades. He's not necessarily the most athletic guy, but he gets guys involved. He pushes the rock from grabbing rebounds. He also leads them in blocks. Victor Valdez is one of the more unique guys in this entire tournament. They have some depth. They are comfortable playing. I like the mid-major teams that are comfortable playing multiple like deep benches. Because I don't think you can just play 5 guys and think that you're gonna beat good teams. Again, not that it hasn't happened. We've seen all things happen in March. But I try to find some trends I like to hold on to that I've seen. And Troy is comfortable playing again 8, 9 guys pretty consistently. But typically, Thomas Dowd and Valdez will get the majority of the minutes. But those guys can play, man. Like they can play. I don't know what happened in our conference, why they performed so poorly, but they were very good in conference play, and they destroyed the teams in their conference tournament. And Nebraska started 20-0, but the weight of the world's on them. They're trying to win their first game in the history of their program, which sounds crazy. I know it's Nebraska. I know Nebraska has done essentially nothing when it comes to basketball. But you think almost every major conference team, especially like a grandfathered in major team, not like an SMU or something like that, or something like one of these other teams VCF. That like isn't VC. Yeah, exactly. One of these teams that are from mid majors that are now in it. I mean, Nebraska's never not been a power conference team, and the fact that they've never won a tournament game is insane. And I felt like before I saw the match, I said, okay, well this year they'll finally get it. Then I saw Mexican Luka, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know now. This now becomes a tricky game." I think Troy won't be afraid. I think Troy again is really efficient. They share the ball really well. So Nebraska, who can score the ball with anybody, and they've had some impressive showings before the little swoon at the end. Team that's not playing great. I'm curious how they show up in this one.
Yeah, Nebraska. I like this Nebraska team. I think I'm going to have them going pretty far, but, they're interesting because they kind of beat up on a weak schedule early. I wouldn't even say kind of. They certainly beat up on a weak schedule.
They did, yeah.
And they then, showed themselves really well early in Big Ten play, like you mentioned. But it was against kind of a weaker portion of the Big Ten schedule. They beat Illinois on the road early on in Big Ten play. They beat Michigan State at home. Both of those were really close games. But otherwise, they didn't see Michigan until they didn't play another Big Ten tournament team. And they beat Wisconsin by 30 in their first Big Ten game. So those are the 3 Big Ten tournament teams they played until they played Michigan, which is, that was after they started 20-0. And they almost won that game. But and then they lost to then Illinois at home. They lost to Purdue in overtime, lost to Iowa, lost to UCLA, then lost to Purdue in the Big Ten championship and the Big Ten tournament. They're obviously not a bad team, but are they a true 4 seed, or are they a team that's kind of they played an easy schedule? Like they beat Creighton. Creighton was a team that was supposed to be good that they beat in non-conference that ended up not being good at all. Yeah. Kansas State they only beat by 1, who I think also maybe we thought would be a little better, and they were awful, and then they beat OU. Also by 6, in a neutral site. Also not NIT type team. I don't know. I don't know about Nebraska. We've seen them play well against NCAA tournament type teams, but I struggle sometimes with these teams that just play really well in their conference, but haven't proven that they could actually do anything out of conference. Because the coaching, the personnel. Those games are really, I don't say emotional, but they're very they're high intensity situations. Yes, you're playing on the road or at home. The fan bases really get into it. They're not NCAA tournament games. They're really not. Versus when you're playing in the non-conference in a neutral site, even if it's not a neutral site, but if you're playing non-conference, seeing a team that you haven't seen maybe ever or anytime recently, those are matchups that are sometimes more indicative of what a team really is, and we haven't really seen that from Nebraska against any NCAA tournament team. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that's why,
I
and,
can
that,
see
and that's
Troy. I
also
can see.
why. Sorry, that's also why I think the Troy matchup is interesting because I don't think Troy, when they step on the court and see Nebraska from a physical profile or athletic standpoint,
Right.
is gonna feel like they're facing a team that's not like a team from their conference. I'm being honest. Like I don't think that
I
this is gonna
100%.
be
I
a
was just
team
about
where
to
it's
make
like,
that point.
yeah, I was there. Sorry to cut you off then, but yeah, it's like they're not gonna come in and
Yeah,
be like,
yeah,
oh, there's 6'10" guys, or again, Michigan got 7'3" guy. Like you're
yeah. I was just about to
mid-major,
say.
like we've not even tried to prepare for this before. I think they're gonna see
Yeah.
now. They're gonna see a team that's gonna be very efficient. All right, Nebraska's been one of the best defensive teams in college basketball this year. They play at a slow pace, but they also limit your actual offensive production. They're top 20, I believe, in field goal percentage allowed. So like they're a good defensive team, but again, I think for a lot of these mid-major, a lot of it is just like confidence and swagger. You walk into a court and okay, it's a 4 seed, but you see Nebraska across their chest. That's not gonna mean anything to any of these guys. Like that doesn't mean anything. They
No.
never won a tournament game. That doesn't mean anything.
Rank. Yeah, they look. Sam Hoiberg, is a scrappy guard. Plays hard, but again, not a guy that's gonna scare you. Not a walk off the bus and you think you've lost the game type of guy. I mean, Price Sanford has been awesome transfer from Iowa, big time shooter. Brother
Yep.
Peyton Sanford, who also played at Iowa. Like he's been big time. But like again, not like he was like some 5-star guy. Rick Mass is also a big man at Nebraska as well. But again, they don't have a bunch of NBA guys right on this team. They're not the
Yeah.
normal 4 seed. Like St. John's has the best team money could buy in many ways. Like that's not what Nebraska is.
Yeah. Not at all. Not at all. What matchup for you are you looking at in terms of a matchup you would circle for a team that you think is gonna be fun to watch for everybody?
Look, I talked a lot about that Illinois Penn matchup. That one I think is going to be very fascinating, but I think Illinois is just too good. TJ Power would have to get 40 again for them to have a shot. For being frank, but
And it doesn't mean
in
that
terms
Keaton
of
Bogler would
another,
also have 40.
yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't. I think. I mean, look, I've liked all the matches we mentioned. Honestly, I'll highlight that St. Mary's A&M matchup again. A&M is a fascinating team because again they've adopted the buckyball mentality that Bucky McMillan brought over from Sanford. Play a super fast style of play. They've played pretty well this season, but they're not the most talented team in the SEC. Kind of like we talked about Nebraska. They're not a team that on paper you look at and say, oh man, like they've got this guy or that guy that I'm super scared of. Of course, they got Ryan Griffin, who's a very experienced guy. Played at Alabama, played at Kansas, so he's not going to be, no, he's going to be used to this environment for sure. But again, the style of play that that they're going to roll out there with compared to St. Mary's, and who can adapt to the other's style of play more, I think will be a fascinating matchup.
Yeah, and I think that I think also the funny thing about the Texas A&M, they probably had the meme of championship week for most people. Where I don't know if you saw the graphic they put on social media. I wish I had it and I could show you, but they said it was like a team picture, and it said pick 14th. Finish tied for 4th.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, people are like, what?
Raise the banner, tied
yeah,
for 4th.
hang the banner.
hang the banner, tied for 4th. I'm not sure that was the smartest graphic to put up, but nonetheless, it does speak to like there's a team with a new coach, not super high expectations, but they definitely have bought into the style of play for sure. This year, right now, they're 9th in points per game. They're 15th in 3-pointers made per game. And they're 14th in attempts. So this is a team that gets it up. They are not a great defensive team. That's the reality. Is they are, in terms of points allowed, they're 321st. Field goal percentage actually isn't too bad, 175th, but it's still not great. 3-point attempts again. They give up a ton of threes because that's just the style of play that they play. A lot of teams in the SEC also play that style as well. So yeah, it's a huge contrast of styles. I think that will be definitely a fun matchup to watch. If you had to go to if we were doing a NBA prospect, I'll talk about Keaton Vogler here. Again, he's the star for Illinois. There's a guy who kind of was not mentioned when we started this draft process completely. It's like a guy that was a top 10 pick potentially. But he had some eye-opening, big-time performances. The kind of signature one that will be the one that will be played on his draft profile when he gets selected in June will be the game at Purdue when he put up, I think, 44 points against them or 43, whatever he had.
Yes.
Where the guy could not miss. And he has deep range. Another guy can shoot on multiple levels. He has really good size as a swing man. So he's a 6'6", 6'7" kind of guy who can shoot over anybody that's going up against him. He's an interesting prospect because with guys like that, sometimes you get afraid where it's like, okay, and like, if what I'm seeing real, and is it worth like investing in this guy? And with a high draft pick, he's gonna be ready for an NBA. But there's been no denying the production that Vogler has put on this year. He's been sensational in some of these games, and again, I don't think he was expected to come in and be the top dog, but he very quickly became Illinois' go-to guy. So I think we're looking for an NBA prospect to circle. Of course, you don't have Caleb Wilson because of the injury, and that's really unfortunate. But Vogler would be the guy I would say is the guy to look at in this draft. He is dynamite.
Yes, I agree on that one. A guy that I'll circle is, I've talked about a ton during this draft process. Bennett Sturts at Iowa.
Yep.
If you watched March Madness, obviously last year he obviously was a stud at Drake, and so it's not a surprise that he's back this time now at Iowa with Coach Ben McCollum transferred over from Drake, and he's I think one of the more underrated guards and players in this draft, and I think he's one of the more volatile draft prospects when it comes to when you look at the different boards that people have, and he's very much a depends on who you're talking to kind of guy because me personally, I think he's a guy that could go that I would consider when you start talking about 6, 7, 8, 9. Maybe even higher. I don't want to go too out of the way because he's older, right? He's a little bit older of a prospect. He's about 21, 22.
Yep.
But when it comes to what he does, I mean, you're talking about an elite shooter, elite feel for the game, processor, plays the game like a supercomputer out there. Plays 40 minutes a night. I think that's kind of contributed to. He struggled at times during the year. Like, he's been great. Obviously, he's an all first team Big Ten guy, but he's had games and he's had stretches where, he doesn't shoot it as well as maybe you'd hope. But he just does so much for them, right? And they don't. This isn't a great team in terms of the talent around him, just like Drake wasn't. But they're playing in the Big Ten now, so it's like every game you're being hunted. Every team knows you're the head of the snake, and he's played well for the most part. But again, when you're playing 40 minutes, you don't get much of a break. It's a tough situation that he's had to deal with. So yeah, look, I think Bennett Sturts is a guy that, depending on the performances he could put together against Clemson and maybe even Florida, against a backcourt of two other guys that are going to be NBA type guys in Fland and Xavier Lee, guys who I think he's considerably better than. He could really vault up NBA draft board if he could put up a big time performance against Florida, because Florida's got, while I don't love their backcourt defensively, they've got, an NBA front court, protecting the paint. Ruben Tinuolu, one of the best defensive bigs in all of college basketball. That's a tough matchup if that's the kind of team he's got to go up against, because I think that's the biggest question with a guy like Bennett Sturts is, you throw NBA size, NBA length around him. Can he finish at the rim? Can he get by guys? He's got not much of an ISO game to speak for. I'm not worried about it because I've seen guys, I just think that skill level is way more important at the guard spot than athleticism. I think that speaks to Keaton Wagler as well. But I just think that the difference is Sturts is 22. Keaton Wagler's
Right.
18, 19. That's
Yeah.
going to be the big difference. Why he's viewed as a top 5, top 6 pick potentially, and Sturts again could go in the lottery. I think probably will go in the lottery, but there's a chance he could also go. We saw a guy like Liam McNeely fall all the way to 28 last year. I've seen mock drafts that have Sturts in the late first round, and going in that same 28, 29 range. So if teams are worried about his age, if they're worried about his athleticism, he could fall really far. He screams Oklahoma City Thunder. He screams Boston Celtics in terms of the way he plays,
Yeah.
and so he's a fascinating prospect that I think we could learn a lot from this in this tournament.
No question about it. What do you want to do in terms of pick? Who's coming out of the South region in your eyes here? I will. And my bracket today, again, do not hold me to this bracket for when we get to actually filling them out. I'm someone who waits sometimes until the morning of Thursday when I actually know what the matchups were for the first 4 in. So I take a lot of time with this, but I think today I'm going Florida. I'm trying to stick. What I try to do, because I've had various different results when it comes to winning or losing things. I don't typically do well with bracket challenges just for obvious reasons because it's impossible. But sometimes I think what has happened in the past and why I've faltered is my conviction about teams. I've allowed late results kind of really skew what I think of teams. And Florida, while they played great down the stretch, that loss to Vanderbilt, I don't want to overreact to that and say, oh well, this was a team that's in trouble. Their front court, you mentioned their front court between Houck and Condon, their front court is NBA ready, and Boogie Flan is a guy who I think plays up for the moment, plays up for the spotlight. He seems to relish those late game situations. Xavier Lee also is a really good guard as well. They're not a team with a lot of weaknesses. I get maybe you want to say their number one weakness is do they have a legit go-to guy? That doesn't necessarily keep you away from making a Final Four when you're that good, though. You can be, I'm not saying I don't have them as a national championship team right now, but I think to get to the Final Four, I like them. Well, you know how badly me and Bruce Pearl don't agree on anything. I did agree with him that it's hard not to root against Kelvin, not Calvin or whatever the hell he said, Kelvin Sampson. Very hard not to root for Kelvin Sampson, and I definitely want to see him try to find a way to win national championships. I feel bad having him not get through. He has a very good team this year. We want to talk about NBA prospect. Kingston Flemings definitely could have been a guy we talked about as well. He is a dynamite, just another one of these NBA guards. Again, if you're an NBA draft guy and you love guard play, this is a tournament for you. Oh my God, there are so many great.
Might be the region
guards.
too.
Yeah, and this is probably the region. You're right about that as well. This is a great tournament for NBA guard play, and Fleming is right there. I think them being a little younger, maybe not quite as good defensively. I do think those things could factor in. Now, Flemings is, I think, he's, in my opinion, the most dynamic scorer they've had since Quentin Grimes. So I don't know how you balance that. Quentin Grimes got into the Final Four. So I'm trying to balance what that means, but he's also a freshman, and Quentin Grimes was a junior, senior, so he's a little more experienced. So I think those are the two teams you're seeing in an Elite Eight matchup. I'm not gonna have any crazy weird upsets, but I think that those are the teams. But I do feel it's gonna be Florida in the end.
I'm going with Illinois. I think Illinois.
Okay.
I think this is going to be a really volatile bracket, really
Okay.
volatile region rather. I think Houston and Illinois meet in the Sweet 16, but I think we can see a lot of weird stuff happen at the top half of that bracket. But I think Illinois is a team that, again, in this tournament setting, with their ability to shoot, their ability to score the basketball, they've got Wagler, they've got Boswell, they've got Stojakovic who's starting to come along, and then they've another team that has a really really big front court with the Visich brothers. Um, they're just a really really deep team. I don't know if they defend it well enough to go on a
Yeah.
really deep run, or to win it all potentially. But um, I just really like the Boswell Wagler backcourt on top of Stojakovic. Um, and then again, they've got NBA size as well. So I like. I'm again, Houston is tough. Like you said, I agree. I want to see Calvin. I can't say I love the Houston program because it's a strong rivalry back in the American Conference
I
days.
know. Yeah.
But Calvin Sampson is. I mean, we've met him, stand up
Yeah.
guy, stand up
Yeah.
as it gets in college basketball.
Yeah. We talked to him. We talked to him twice.
Yeah, quite a few times, and he's for a guy that it's always funny. We always talk about how for a guy that like back in the day was like, oh, one of the biggest cheats in the sport, Calvin Sampson. You're like, really? Like,
Yeah, and he
he's
think
like
about
the
when he
nicest
was like,
guy. I think
yeah,
Will Wade. Like Will Wade has that thing too.
No, I was gonna say too. Also, like what he got popped for, like now looks like child's play. Like in hindsight, like it's just like,
Yeah.
all right, it's calling Eric Gordon too much. Like, okay,
Yeah.
it wasn't like he had a bag of money going out to guys. Allegedly, that's not what was being alleged with his violation.
Yeah.
So yeah, we looked at him as this crazy cheater. When it's like, and now getting to meet him, you probably realize, oh no, he probably really was just like wanting to know how Eric Gordon's day was. Yeah, he wanted to know how Eric Gordon's day was, and he actually had something important to say to him that day about life or about whatever. Like that's just how he is, and it's against the rules. He couldn't do it as many times as he did, and in the periods in the recruiting when he did. But that was just that's him. So yeah, I agree. Not to give him bail, he broke the rules, but he is like a guy that in hindsight, you're like, what are we talking about when it came to like why he was seen as like some college basketball villain.
I think there's a decent chance this might be his last year.
I agree.
You see that we saw that last year with Pearl, where when you got your best team, it's like, man, I can't do another year if like we don't have another super team coming in. Yeah, and now again, I do wonder if like he saw what happened at Auburn this year, and he's like, do I really want to leave my son, with a lesser version of Houston? Because that's what's going to happen next year if like he leaves and they don't really attack the portal well. Now again, Bruce Pearl did that, made a very shady move and quit, a month before the season started for no reason apparently.
Oh my gosh! Don't get me started.
And so they Auburn had a team that they thought was going to be, he did the old college football where he saw the quarterback in spring practice, was like, I gotta get out of here. This ain't the season that I think we're gonna have. But
especially coming out of a Final Four.
But no, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like Janai Broom and Chad Baker Bazaar aren't walking through the door.
Chad Baker Bazaar not walking through he's not walking through any door.
Apparently they could have brought him back. But no, they but this might be his last year. I mean, Houston obviously losing, Flemings and Sinak and probably using and probably Sharp. That's your whole team basically is going to be gone. And again, the most talented team he's probably had from an NBA draft perspective. I hope he gets it done, but I just, like you said, I don't know. I don't know if the formula for Houston is winning with freshmen, right? Which is what you're gonna have to do.
What's he trying to do right now?
With Fleming and Sinak and this kid Chase McCarty's come on, a little bit, another redshirt freshman, and Isaiah Harwell, like they're just too young. I feel like Mercy Miller's a sophomore, like they're playing a lot of guys a lot younger. Sharp and Uzan and Tugler are like the vets, but it's a tough mix. Uzan is a guy I'm paying attention to. Like if he can kind of come on, because he's kind of been, he's kind of fell behind, the pecking order, obviously with Fleming coming in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like I told you, like I thought last year Milos Uzan. I mean, you talked about this. I thought he was one of the most improved players throughout college basketball, and I actually was really excited about him as a potential NBA prospect moving forward, knowing he would, of course, do another year. I don't think he had a great year. I'm just going to be real. I don't think he had a great year. Like, I think that, like, considering, I think, what the expectation could have been for him, he didn't shoot the ball that great. They won, and, like, he did the winning plays. He did the things that Houston does. So, he, like, when you say he don't play well, I'm talking about just, like, individual NBA stuff. When it comes to being a team player, he did all the right things. But I think in terms of, like, whatever your high ceiling may have been was for him, as this young guard who seemed to really come into his own last year and became really instrumental in the Houston's run. I thought this year's been a little disappointing, but now it's March, and whatever happened during the year kind of doesn't matter, and he could use the experience that he had from last year, and now him being a veteran, leading a bunch of freshmen, him and Sharp, that will be, I think, a very important storyline to see, like how those guys live up to the billing of being the veteran leaders on this Houston Cougars team. Very fascinating region. I cannot wait for these games.
A rematch of Florida and Houston would be awesome.
That's what I have. That's what I have. I think it's going to happen. It would be awesome. That would be that's the matchup I think you want to see if you have a potential for an Elite Eight. So I have Duke versus Florida. I then have in the other region, I'm trying to remember the teams. I had Arizona and I had Iowa State. So Big 12 matchup on one side, you got SEC versus ACC on the other side. Do you remember? Do you have your final four teams for this before we get out of here?
Yes, I have Duke, Illinois on the left side of the bracket. On the right side of the bracket, I've got Arkansas and Alabama, SEC, which was a hell of a game during the regular season.
Oh yeah, I know that was maybe the game of college basketball this year was that game in Tuscaloosa. So I will have. So I have a rematch of Florida Duke. I'm going to say Duke wins again. And then I'm going to say on the other side that Arizona is going to beat Iowa State. So I think you're going to have a rematch of Duke versus Arizona. And I think this time the Wildcats get it done. I have Arizona winning the national championship. I think Arizona is, again, their size. And I think if you're talking about a matchup, it's so 5-4 games are so hard because it's like I have no idea if these teams are going to play each other. They have to get so many games to get to each other. But if I'm doing a matchup of Duke versus Arizona, I think that Arizona's guard play would be the difference in that game. Again, I don't know what Foster's situation would be, but I know Cole Pete and Krivas will be there. And I know that they will have 5 fouls to give to Boozer and give him hell as much as they can. And I think that would end up being the difference in the game. So I think Tommy Lloyd somehow wins a national championship for Mark Few. That would make me happy for him, but sad for Gonzaga. But I have Arizona win the national championship over the Duke Blue Devils.
It was fascinating. Mark Few was on the Field of 68 doing an interview, and they said something to him about about just getting, what's it like, getting past the getting to the NCAA tournament or whatever, and he's just like, look, at this point, we're trying to win national championships, right? Like we don't just get into a tournament or these last few seasons have been disappointments, because we want to play in the national championship game, that's what we've done in our program. I'm like, it's crazy. It's crazy to think because it's like, and this isn't Duke, but
right, but
that's where you guys have been.
Yeah, it's become that kind of program. You mentioned Calvin Sampson's swan song. I also wonder if there's a few swan songs too this year.
Yeah, he seems really excited about Davis Fogel. I wonder if he kind of wants to stick around for his development.
Yeah, maybe that makes him stay. But Few's got the best defensive team I think he's had maybe ever when I've watched Gonzaga basketball. Like that, I was, you know me, I was very down on this season. I was like, I don't think, our portal was kind of mid. Okay, we're gonna run the team through, Huff and EK. Like, what's the guard play gonna look like? So I was very concerned. Then I watched how the team guarded, and I was like, oh, Gonzaga doesn't normally have defenders like this in guard. That kind of makes up for whatever, offensive efficiency issues they could have, and they have had it at times. So I think Few probably looks at the team. I think the reason why I say swan song, because he probably looks at the team like, yo, man, okay, maybe not the most gifted offensive team, but I have a bunch of dogs defensively. If I can't win it with this team, how many more years am I going to be doing this thing? EK will be gone. Huff, in theory, could come back, but he also could leave for the NBA if he wants to do that.
I'm pretty sure they have a big recruiting class coming in as well, right?
They do. They did recruit pretty well. They've been light on the recruiting class of late, but this one coming up is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it felt like he was recrecruiting like he was getting ready to retire the last couple of years, hitting the portal super hard.
It was just portal guys, high school guys. Really, was kind of, we weren't trying to get no high school guys. I'm like, yo, we were getting Chet Holmgren and Suggs. What the hell's going on? Where's the without all Americans? But they do now have some high 4-star guys next year that I think will probably play.
But yeah, no, my final four. I've got Duke beating Illinois. I think. Uh, did these teams play? You know where you see these matchups? I'm like, I don't remember these teams.
I
I
think
don't think
Duke
they
played
did,
Illinois
but
last year. I don't think
they
they played
played
this
last year.
year.
Yeah, they played last year. That's why it sounds familiar. Yeah,
Yeah,
uh, beat the brakes off of them in Madison Square Garden.
they did. That was
but
yeah. Signature win for Duke last year.
yes, and so I got Duke beating them here. I like Illinois, but I think this is a tougher matchup for them. Duke's a hell of a defensive team.
Yeah.
John Shire's a hell of a defensive coach, and I don't know if I know they've been able to get their game off against a lot of teams, Illinois, but I don't know if they're getting it off against these guys. Now again, I got them beating Houston, so if they can get past Houston, maybe they can beat anybody from that standpoint. But yeah, no, I've got Duke on one side getting to the national championship game, and I've got Arkansas beating Alabama, getting to the national title game.
Okay.
Setting up a very spicy John Calipari versus John Shire.
Yeah,
national title game. CBS would be the big winner.
Historical matchup too. We've had Duke in Arkansas in the national championship game before. Shout out to Nolan Richardson.
Yeah. Did they beat them in '94?
Yeah, 94, they Arkansas won. Yeah, 40 minutes of hell.
Yeah, so it's a hell of a match. CBS would be popping bottles if they can get that. And I think John Shire wins his first one. I know I kind of poo-pooed this Duke team earlier. I was like, they're not that deep. They're beatable. But I think they'll be the most.
It's easy to say that stuff until you start putting teams in certain spots in the actual bracket, and you actually gotta say the team that's gonna knock Duke out. It becomes trickier.
And that's honestly like the question of how do you do your bracket, right? Do you do your bracket where you're just picking the games one by one and you're just saying who I think is going to win this game, or are you picking it knowing that, like, look, I mean, like, I don't know if UConn will get past Furman, but if UConn, but I think UConn might beat Duke, but like, if I don't think they can get past Furman, do I really pick UConn to beat Duke? Like, like there's those, conversations that you have to have in your head, but if you're picking it straight up, things may come out a little different. I don't know what I'm doing here, right? but I do think Duke ends up the winner, and I think that's going to be the chalkiest of chalky picks when you start looking at these bracket challenges and who's the most picked national title winner. It's going to be Duke, but I give me grace given that I have three teams that aren't on the 1 or 2 line outside of Duke, but yeah, Duke I think is a really good team. But look, a match between Duke and Arkansas. Those teams did play earlier in the year, and that was a hell of a matchup. But they couldn't do anything with Boozer. Thanksgiving, that was a Thanksgiving game in that matchup. They couldn't do anything with Boozer. Acuff is a different player now than he was when those teams played.
Yeah.
And I think they would know that if he got them to that point, if they got to that championship game, it'd be because Acuff put him on the backpack.
He's on a Derrick Rose kind of run.
Yes. And the funny you mention that because there's been a conversation now, obviously, of is Acuff the best guard Calipari's had? And as a Memphis fan and just a college basketball fan, I can't bring myself to say that. I'll put him ahead of anybody except Rose and John Wall.
That's what I'm thinking too.
If they get to the national championship,
my instinct is it's going to be very hard for me to say any college basketball point guard is better than Rose or Wall. Like, those are two of the best.
Right. You just have to be so good.
Yeah. And Acuff is amazing.
And so,
but if
they win a national title,
it's gonna take a March Madness run like a Kemba Walker, like we talked about earlier. It's gonna have to take where you win a championship, where then those conversations become more fair.
Yes, especially in a year where there's a lot of good teams, right? Like even last year, Walter Clayton winning the title. Of course, they didn't get a chance to play Duke. That would have been a great matchup, but you kind of wonder, like, did he go through the gauntlet that Rose had to go through a series gauntlet to get to the national championship game and almost win it? This is a year where, like, if Arkansas gets past in Arizona and potentially gets past Purdue, and depending on what happens and how things shake out, if they win a national again, I now I can have that conversation more comfortably when we enter draft season. But No, regardless, I expect this is going to be a very volatile bracket. Really quickly, is there like a team that you think could get to the Final Four that's like not a top 5 seed even?
BYU, I would circle because they
Maybe
have the Bansa. Is it outside the top 5 seed, you said, or 4? Top 4?
yes. My also my
I was.
camera just went out, so I don't know if you
Oh,
want
my
to
bad.
maybe
Yeah, no worries.
put an overlay or something.
Yeah, no worries. For me, as I'll drop you down real quick if I can find anything. But no, for me, I would go. I would go BYU if you have someone like the Banter going crazy. Um, I would also look at someone like a St. John's, like I said earlier, is a team that I also think is potentially one of the best teams and definitely a threat potentially. Uh, I tell you, I know everyone else is down on Texas Tech. I'm not as down on them everybody else is. I'll be real. I'm not. I think that they're a team that definitely uh, could be a dangerous team come March Madness time as well. So I like Texas Tech, even without JT Toppin potentially. But yeah, it's gonna be hard. This is not one where I think it's clear that there are 4 or 5 seeds. Kansas, I think, is a team you have to consider as well. Well, they're out there. You're talking about 4 outside of 4, so you can't put Kansas there. South region, yeah, I would say the teams I would circle are St. John's and Texas Tech and Vanderbilt. Those would be teams I would circle.
Vanderbilt, I like Vandy.
Yeah.
If Carolina had Caleb Wilson, we've seen Hubert Davis go on runs before. They've got the talent. When you count them out is when they can get dangerous. So I don't want to poo-poo them too much, but it's just gonna be tough without Caleb Wilson. In terms of like really high seeds, I mean, again, Kentucky's got a lot of talent. Again, another team like. Even in a 7-2 matchup between them and Iowa State, I don't know if they'll get past Santa Clara, but if they do, like they could go on a run, and who knows what happens at that point. I mentioned Miami as well earlier, and another team from that region. Again, I know you're not going to want to hear this, given it being a Gonzaga fan, but I wonder if Will Wade could string something together at NC State. I wonder if they could get hot. I like BYU, appearance? But I don't know about Final Four. But look, if you get to the Elite Eight, who knows what could happen?
That's a big stretch to say they go into the Final Four.
If Arizona would have to get taken out, right? I think that's always when you talking about the math. And how do you get one of these double digits?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're trying to do the math on getting a double digit seed. You need a 1 seed that gets bounced, and then things get weird, and then could NC State beat Arkansas, right? You have to start having that conversation. Could they beat Wisconsin in the Elite Eight? That becomes a different conversation.
It's funny. I actually think that the U may be an interesting team to look at as well. I would be afraid of a rookie coach, but you mentioned
right.
You mentioned the guard play that they have, and they've had a really, really strong season this year. Miami's been to the Final Four before, so there's a little bit of a pedigree there of winning. So I wouldn't count them out either. Kendall, man, this has been a lot of fun.
South Florida.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not to cut you off. I was just gonna say South Florida would be my double digit seed. That again, Final Four is gonna be tough, but when you're talking about, and I don't know if they beat Duke, but again, if Duke gets beat by St. John's or they get beat by Kansas, could South Florida beat Kansas or somebody like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't discount it.
Yeah, no question, man. But Kendall, this has been a lot of fun, doing this bracket breakdown for New Generation Media, our bracket Blitz. I feel good. I feel good about the conversations. I feel good about the strategy of how to attack this bracket. I hope you guys found this to be enlightening and found this to be entertaining, which is always what we're trying to do here at New Generation Media. Of course, if you like all of our content, be sure to make sure you follow us everywhere. So on social media, of course, follow us on New Generation Pod on X, New Generation Podcasts on Instagram. Individually, of course, you can follow me on social media, EJ_Stewart, Instagram Action EJ, and TikTok as well, Action EJ. Kendall's on X, New Gen Ken. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. New Generation Media is the channel on YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. I love the comment section. The comment section was engaged as well. Yeah, Big Friendly making the case that he thinks a high point is going to be the big upset in the first round, beating Wisconsin. So shout out to Big Friendly. Tweet us, reach out to us. Let us know what your picks are for March Madness. Who you got your Final Four? Who you got win the championship? Who you got as your big upset picks? We want to hear about them. Again, hit us up on social media, and make sure you subscribe to the channel New Generation Media on YouTube, and subscribe to the podcast channel New Generation Podcast Network. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. And again, like and comment on the video and on the podcast stream. If you can, please give us a 5-star review and leave a written review. Those things are all really helpful. And that's going to do it for this special edition of a New Generation Media presentation, our bracket Blitz. Thank you to Kendall for joining me. Thank you to the people that watched. Thank you to our friends in the chat for engaging. This has been an absolutely fun conversation. Of course, again, you can catch us wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in a little bit. Take it easy. Peace.